Chapter 446. The muscles on Nongju's face twitched. She wanted to grab him and beat him up, but she resisted the urge and winked at Ziyi. The father and daughter were indeed connected. Ziyi quickly understood her master's intention and chased after Yu Qianqiu. She accompanied him and said with a smile, "Yu Qianqiu, what kind of magic do you think Elder Bai will teach you?" Master's cultivation is unfathomable. It's not something we can guess. I will learn whatever he teaches," Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. Ziyi's skin was indeed thinner than Nongju's. She asked in a roundabout way, but she didn't directly state her intentions. Yu Qianqiu happily pretended to be confused and chatted with her. The two of them went directly to the plantation. The mess in the garden made the two of them dumbfounded. The originally bright red seedlings of the deficient flame profound fruit were now lying all over the place. Not a single one could be found. It was obvious that they had all been destroyed by Changchun's roar. Miss Mu stood in the garden with a pale face. Her eyes were dull and she seemed to have lost her soul. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, even Ziyi had heard from Nongju that the deficient flame profound fruit was prepared for the Nanming ancestors' mount. It was of great significance to Bai Changchun. She didn't know what would happen if Bai Changchun knew that all the deficient flame profound fruit had been destroyed. A mere Miss Mu couldn't bear Bai Changchun's anger. Yu Qianqiu walked into the messy garden and walked to Miss Mu's side. He sighed slightly, knowing that this woman was frightened. He patted her shoulder and shouted, "Miss Mu!" Miss Mu suddenly turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu. She wanted to cry but had no tears. She shouted, "Mister! Don't worry, this has nothing to do with you. I will explain to Master and plead on your behalf. I think Master won't make things difficult for you." Yu Qianqiu comforted her. Hearing him plead on her behalf, Miss Mu immediately thanked him profusely. Although she was still frightened, at least she had a chance to live. "Don't think too much. Master wants us to tidy up the island." Yu Qianqiu called out to her and the two of them immediately got to work. Perhaps Miss Mu was thinking of atoning for her sins, so she put in extra effort. As for Ziyi, who was following him around, he needed her help. It would be a waste if he did not use her. Yu Qianqiu had tricked her into going with him. Now he had another good helper. The three of them worked together. 3 days later, Yu Qianqiu could not wait to come to the front of the big house. He suppressed the excitement on his face and walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. Bai Changchun held a jade archive in his hand. Nongju and her father kept glancing back and forth at it, as if they were trying to decipher its mysteries. When he saw Yu Qianqiu come in, Bai Changchun loosened his grip. The jade archive slowly floated up and was delivered to the former. With a pious expression, Yu Qianqiu took the archive with both hands. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Master." He glanced at Nongju and her father, then deftly stuffed it into his storage pouch. Outside, Miss Mu walked to the front door with a miserable expression. She lowered her head and knelt down in front of Bai Changchun. Everyone in the house turned to look at her. She was summoned by Yu Qianqiu. Naturally, Yu Qianqiu had to make an appearance. He was also a little nervous, but he still braced himself and reported, "Master, the garden that Miss Mu was taking care of was destroyed by your long whistle 3 days ago. She has come to ask for forgiveness from you." Bai Changchun frowned. He quickly released his divine sense and had a clear picture of the garden. Although he knew that he was the one who destroyed it, his expression still darkened. His gaze was so intense that Miss Mu couldn't help but tremble. Yu Qianqiu knew that things were not looking good. A monster king was not even as good as an ant in the old man's eyes. If he didn't say anything, Miss Mu would probably die. Hence, he promptly bowed and pleaded, "Master, I was the one who brought Miss Mu to Obedient Island. I didn't take care of the profound fruit garden and destroyed Master's profound fruit. I chose the wrong person, so I can't escape responsibility. Master, please punish me as well." Hearing this, Miss Mu bowed and kowtowed. Although the expression on her face couldn't be seen clearly, it could be seen that her delicate body was trembling slightly, as if she was sobbing softly. To be honest, not to mention Bai Changchun, even Nongju didn't think much of Miss Mu, a mere monster king. Usually when they saw her, they only thought that she was doing odd jobs on Obedient Island. Now, seeing Yu Qianqiu pleading in a disguised way, Nongju couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Others might not know, but Nongju knew that Old Man Bai had clearly decided that Yu Qianqiu would be the successor of the Demon Ghost Region's torturer. Yu Qianqiu was pleading on behalf of this monster king. Obviously, the relationship between the two was not shallow. Although this monster king was just doing odd jobs now, once Yu Qianqiu became the torturer in the future, this monster king's status in the Demon Ghost region would definitely rise. Maybe he would be above everyone else. With this thought, Nongju couldn't help but look at Miss Mu a few more times. Subconsciously, she had already begun to take her seriously. Bai Changchun's eyes paused on Yu Qianqiu's face for a while, then moved to Miss Mu who was kneeling on the ground. His face returned to normal and he said to her, "This is none of your business. You can leave now." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was instantly relieved. This meant that Bai Changchun wouldn't pursue the matter further. Miss Mu didn't say anything. She just kowtowed a few times then stood up and slowly retreated. When she turned around to leave, her eyes swept across Yu Qianqiu, full of infinite gratitude. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. After all, he and this Monster King had a physical relationship. Although he didn't do anything out of line, he did serve him wholeheartedly. Just based on this he should help him. Ahem. Nongju cleared his throat, breaking the silence in the room. He crossed his hands, turned to face Bai Changchun and snorted coldly, "Old Bai, you can't be like this. My Zi listened to your orders and protected your disciple for such a long time. Even if she didn't do anything meritorious, she still worked hard. As an elder, you should at least do something for her." "What do you want me to do?" Bai Changchun asked calmly. "Do you think I'll let you go through so much trouble?" Nongju turned to Yu Qianqiu, tilted his chin and said, "Just use what he has. That magic art you gave him just now, let Zi bask in the glory and learn it." "Damn it. Old people who don't die are thieves." Yu Qianqiu squinted at Nongju as if he was guarding against a thief. Bai Changchun said expressionlessly, "That won't do. That's for my disciple." "That's easy. Worst comes to worst, Zi can also be your disciple. I won't have any objections." Nongju turned around and shouted, "Zi, come and be my disciple." Zi was stunned. She was a little suspicious and asked pitifully, "Master, don't you want me anymore?" "Nonsense." Nongju stared at her and reprimanded, "Isn't it good to have two masters? With two masters supporting you, who would dare to bully you in the future?" Yu Qianqiu looked at this guy and was speechless. It was true that the more handsome a man was, the more shameless he was. The more handsome a man was, the more annoying he was. Zi hesitantly walked to Bai Changchun. Although she really wanted to be Bai Changchun's disciple, she always felt it was inappropriate. But before she opened her mouth, Bai Changchun shook his head and said, "I don't accept female disciples." His words made Zi stiff. "Old Bai." Nongju was about to act shamelessly, but Bai Changchun raised his hand and interrupted her. "You don't have to be my disciple. It's not impossible to learn, but I have a condition." "What condition?" Nongju asked carefully as if she was worried that there was a trap in front of her. Chapter 447. Bai Changchun didn't beat around the bush and said directly, "You know, before I go to the Eastern Holy Land, I need Nanming to refine a suitable spiritual treasure for me. Now that the deficient flame profound fruit has been destroyed, I'm afraid he can't come. If you can help me get him here, Zi will have a share of this incantation. Of course, the premise is that he's willing to help me refine the treasure. That old guy has a strange temper. I'm afraid he won't give me face." Nongju pinched her chin and thought. Suddenly, her expression turned fierce and she said, "Why are you being so polite to him? Just tie him up. He's no match for you." "Do I need you to remind me if it works?" Bai Changchun asked indifferently. Nongju smiled awkwardly and said, "That's true. That guy doesn't listen to persuasion or force. It's useless to tie him up. Maybe we'll tie him up and worship him, let alone refine anything." Then her face turned bitter and she spread out her hands. "I don't know what to do. Old Bai, you're clearly making things difficult for me." A dark shadow flashed out of Bai Changchun's storage bag and floated in front of Nongju. It was dark and dull. It was the sky-swallowing beast's fang that Yu Qianqiu sawed off from the underworld gate. Nongju slapped her forehead and suddenly said, "How could I forget about this thing? Take it and I'll make sure Nanming follows me obediently. There's no time to lose. I'll go now and come back early." She grabbed it in her hand, looked at it and stuffed it into her storage bag. Just as she turned around she stopped and said, "Old Bai, let's make this clear first. I only care about bringing Nanming here. As for whether he agrees to refine the treasure for you or not, it's not something I can force." Bai Changchun neither agreed nor objected. He just sat there without saying a word. Nongju smiled and said, "If you don't say anything I'll take it as a yes. Don't regret it when the time comes. Okay. I'll go to Shinshin Island and bring Nanming here." As soon as she finished speaking, she disappeared in the blink of an eye. Outside there was the sound of rapid flying. Zi looked outside and was slightly stunned. She also knew that her master had made this trip because of her. Master, what kind of person is that patriarch Nanming? He didn't even give face to you? Yu Qianzhou asked, puzzled. This was not the first time he had heard someone mention ancestor Nanming. Even the number one expert in the world, Bai Changchun, had to spend a lot of effort to plant the deficient flame profound fruit in order to cater to this person. Bai Changchun now had high hopes for Yu Qianzhou. Naturally, he would not be stingy in teaching him about the stories of these top figures in the cultivation world. He said slowly, there are 5 great people in the cultivation world today and Nanming is one of them. This person's cultivation level has already reached the mid-stage of deity transformation. Although his cultivation level isn't the highest when it comes to tool refinement, if he says he's number 2, no one would dare to say they're number 1. He's the number 1 tool refinement expert in the cultivation world. 5 great men of the cultivation world? Was there such a thing? I'm afraid you're one of them. Yu Qianzhou nodded and said, no wonder Senior Nongzhu said he has a strange temper. It turns out that he's arrogant because of his talent. You can't say that. Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said, since the ancient war there hasn't been a tool refinement expert in the cultivation world who can refine spirit treasures. Nanming's sudden appearance attracted many people's covetous eyes. They all wanted to take him under their command, and there were even people who threatened and tempted him. Nanming could be said to be annoyed, so he lived in seclusion on Shenzhen Island. It's very difficult for ordinary people to invite him. I've also helped him solve some problems. In order to return the favor, he refined a treasure for me once. Unfortunately, the success rate of refining a high-grade spirit treasure is too low, so he failed. Yu Qianzhou secretly guessed that the so-called problem solved was probably to scare off those people who threatened and tempted ancestor Nanming. Otherwise, why would he need to ask the number 1 expert in the world to solve the problem? This master is a super expert in fighting. Since it's so difficult to invite the ancestor Nanming, then why was master able to invite him again after planting the deficient flame profound fruit? Is it just because his mount likes to eat the deficient flame profound fruit? Yu Qianzhou asked the doubt in his heart. Bai Changchun explained with unprecedented patience, because the last refining failed, he felt that he hadn't repaid my favor. However, he couldn't break his own rules and easily make a move, so he gave me some deficient flame profound fruit seeds. He asked me to gather all the refining materials, and when the deficient flame profound fruit ripens, I can invite him again. There are 3 chances in total, and no matter whether the refining is successful or not, the favor he owes me will be written off. Then Senior Nongzhu was able to invite the ancestor Nanming over with just a beast-toothed pride from the underworld gate? Yu Qianzhou asked respectfully. It sounded like he was humbly asking for advice. Ziyi listened quietly at the side, not daring to disturb them. In front of Senior Bai, she didn't dare to behave too atrociously. Bai Changchun also answered without hesitation. This is the rule he set. Whoever can give him precious materials that can move his heart can invite him out of Shenzhen Island. As for the grade of the treasure he is invited to refine, it depends on whether the materials given to him are sufficient. I see. Yu Qianzhou was deep in thought. Suddenly he remembered the 5 great men of the cultivation world. He couldn't help but ask again, Master, you mentioned the 5 great men of the cultivation world. Besides the ancestor Nanming, who are the other 4? Hearing this, Ziyi looked at Bai Changchun with a strange light in her eyes. Obviously, she knew that one of the 5 great men of the cultivation world was the thin old man in front of her. Bai Changchun said slowly, besides Nanming of Shenzhen Island, there is also Wen Lanfeng of Baiwan Nation and Lu Yanqing of Lingfang Valley. There is also the world's number 1 fortune teller, Great Master Tianju. He was the one who predicted that the star orb would appear in the Chinese cultivation world. However, he has already passed away. To be precise, there are only 4 of the 5 great men left. He stopped here, not saying the 5th one. In fact, Yu Qianzhou had already guessed it was him. He was definitely too embarrassed to say that he was one of the 5 great men. Ziyi stuck out her tongue and said to Yu Qianzhou playfully, the last one is the leader of the 5 great men, Senior Bai himself. I've already guessed it. Master is the world's number 1 expert. If even you can't be one of them, then I'm afraid the 5 great men don't deserve their reputation. Yu Qianzhou flattered him again. Then he turned to stare at Ziyi and frowned, so you already knew. Why haven't I heard you mention it before? Ziyi glared at him and immediately retorted, you didn't ask me. I thought you already knew. Who knew that you didn't even know about this? Okay, you're knowledgeable. Yu Qianzhou didn't want to argue with her in front of his master, so he asked, then tell me why Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing can be one of the 5 great men in the cultivation world. Ziyi glanced at Bai Changchun. Seeing that there was nothing strange about him, she immediately said with a hint of boasting, "By one nations Wen Lanfeng is also a late-stage soul transformation expert, and not just any late-stage soul transformation expert. He is ranked second in the cultivation world after Senior Bai, second only to Senior Bai. He is also one of the 5 great men of the cultivation world because of his extraordinary cultivation." Wen Lanfeng of Baiwan Nation? Yu Qianqiu secretly remembered this person. In the soul formation stage, people who could reach a cultivation level second only to Bai Changchun must be extraordinary. He had to be careful in the future. Speaking of this, Ziyi suddenly had an expression of admiration on her face. This made Yu Qianqiu very curious. He thought to himself, could there be someone more admired by this girl than Bai Changchun? Ziyi continued in high spirits. Senior Lu Yanqing of Lingfang Valley is a female senior. Her cultivation has also reached the middle stage of soul formation. She's the best healer in the cultivation world. It's said that as long as someone is still breathing, she can save them. And what? Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. He thought to himself, is this girl a fan of Lu Yanqing? Although I haven't seen Senior Lu Yanqing, I heard that she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Countless experts in the cultivation world admire her appearance and pursue her, but none of them can enter her eyes. Even Senior Wen Lanfeng, one of the 5 great men, fought with Senior Bai for her. Ziyi stuck out her tongue at this point. She looked at Bai Changchun and didn't dare to continue. Yu Qianqiu saw that she wanted to say something but stopped. Coupled with the words she hadn't finished before, he suddenly became suspicious. He thought to himself, could it be that the most beautiful woman in the world is so beautiful that the number 1 and number 2 experts are jealous of each other? So the 2 peerless experts fought over a woman? F***ck. This news is a little too shocking. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he glanced at his master. He didn't dare to look him in the eye, but he didn't dare to continue asking lest he touched Old Man Bai's sore spot. However, his heart was full of guesses. It seemed that the most beautiful woman in the world wasn't with Old Man Bai. Could it be that Old Man Bai, the number 1 expert in the world, couldn't win against the number 2 expert in the world for the most beautiful woman in the world? What a piece of gossip. When Bai Changchun saw Yu Qianqiu's wretched and lascivious expression, he immediately knew that his disciple was thinking beyond the clouds. He immediately said to Ziyi, he doesn't know much about this level. Since you've already said it, tell him the whole story. Otherwise he'll only know a little and make wild guesses. Yes. Ziyi bowed. Since Old Man Bai had spoken, she had nothing to worry about. She continued to say to Yu Qianqiu, I heard that Senior Wen Lanfeng is one of the craziest pursuers of Senior Lu Yanqing, but Senior Lu Yanqing doesn't like him. Until one time, Senior Lu was pestered by Senior Wen to the point where she couldn't do anything. She said to Senior Wen that as long as you can defeat the world's number 1 expert, Bai Changchun, I'll become your Taoist companion. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. It was completely different from his previous guess. It turned out that the world's number 2 expert was a love-struck fool. Needless to say, it must be that Bai Changchun had inexplicably fought with this love-struck fool. Ziyi secretly glanced at Bai Changchun and stuck out her tongue again. She said, I heard from my master that after Senior Wen heard Senior Lu's words, he immediately sought out Old Man Bai for a duel. Old Man Bai felt it was a little strange at that time. After learning of Senior Wen's intention, he suddenly flew into a rage and attacked mercilessly. As a result, Senior Wen was seriously injured in less than 10 moves. If it wasn't for my master stopping him, I'm afraid Senior Wen wouldn't have been able to keep his life. After that, I heard that Senior Wen never went to find Senior Lu again and has been cultivating in Baiwan country. Chapter 448. Speaking of this, Bai Changchun still didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he thought about it. At that time, when he heard that Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was profound, he had long wanted to spar with Wen Lanfeng. But when he heard about Wen Lanfeng's infatuated behavior, he felt deeply ashamed. He felt that Wen Lanfeng's cultivation couldn't be that high, and it wasn't worth it for him to fight. So, he had never looked for Wen Lanfeng. However, the weather was unpredictable. He didn't look for Wen Lanfeng, but Wen Lanfeng looked for him instead. At that time, Bai Changchun thought that he must have misunderstood him. This must be an extraordinary man who stood at the peak of the cultivation world and was as lonely as him, searching for experts to spar with. Who would have thought that Wen Lanfeng would actually come to challenge him because of that Lu woman's excuse? Did he really think he was someone important? Bai Changchun was almost angered to the point smoke came out of his nose. He didn't say a word before grabbing onto Wen Lanfeng and giving him a beating Wen Lanfeng to the point he didn't have the strength to resist at all. Only then did Wen Lanfeng realize that the number one expert in the world was not someone he, the so-called number two expert in the world, could compare to. The difference in strength between the two was huge. Fortunately, at the critical moment when his life was at stake, Nongzhu, who had some friendship with him, heard the news and rushed over. Finally, she helped him escape from Bai Changchun. After letting Wen Lanfeng go, Bai Changchun thought about it for a few days. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. That woman surnamed Lu in Spirit Fang Valley really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She was the one who caused the mess, and she actually dared to use him as a shield. She was simply reckless. So he went to Spirit Fang Valley to find Lu Yan to settle the accounts. In fact, Lu Yanqing did not expect that Wen Lanfeng would really dare to go to Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun was recognized as the number one expert in the cultivation world. Who could be his opponent? How many people would dare to cause trouble for Bai Changchun? She believed that by mentioning Bai Changchun she would be able to scare Wen Lanfeng. However, the determination of that infatuated woman made her speechless. After Wen Lanfeng was defeated, he dragged his body with serious injuries to Lingfang Valley and bid farewell to Lu Yanqing with a desolate face. He said that he would look for her on the day he could defeat Bai Changchun, otherwise he would not see her again, so he dragged his injuries back. After this he really didn't meet with Lu Yanqing again. It didn't matter if he left, but it gave Lu Yanqing a fright. Bai Changchun was a famous madman in the cultivation world. He had always been the one who provoked others. No one dared to provoke him. If Bai Changchun knew that he was the one who instigated Wen Lanfeng to challenge him to a duel, he would definitely not let him off. Sure enough, her guess was right. Not long after Wen Lanfeng left, Bai Changchun arrived. Goodness gracious. Those so-called experts of the cultivation world who wanted to go to Spirit Fang Valley to get close to it were so scared that they ran away for fear that they would get into trouble. Those people, who were usually willing to go through mountains of swords and seas of fire for her, all seemed so pale and powerless the moment Bai Changchun arrived. She couldn't even find a single person to speak up for her, and they all slipped away. Through this lesson, Lu Yanqing could be considered to have thoroughly seen the true face of these men. In comparison, Wen Lanfeng made her feel more gratified. Although his infatuated appearance could not make him the man in her heart, he dared to fight with Bai Changchun just because of her excuse. This really moved her a little. Even Wen Lanfeng was no match for Bai Changchun. Lu Yanqing knew that she was no match for him, so she simply admitted her mistake and let Bai Changchun deal with her. At this time, Nongzhu, who had some friendship with her, came again like a timely rain. She stopped Bai Changchun and praised Lu Yanqing's countless merits and virtues, and finally made Bai Changchun show mercy. However, the death penalty could be avoided, but the punishment could not be forgiven. Under the repeated obstruction of Nongzhu, Bai Changchun still abruptly abolished Lu Yanqing's cultivation of 200 years, and beat her from the middle stage of Huashan realm to the early stage of Huashan realm. However, Lu Yanqing had managed to save her life, and this matter had been resolved just like that. As Bai Changchun silently recalled the above events, Ziyi also repeated them. What she said was what she had heard from her master, Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu was inwardly astounded when he heard this. This master of his simply slaughtered in all directions. He really was unrivaled under the heavens, truly awe-inspiring. However, he also heard another clue from it, that was, Nongzhu had a wide network of friends all over the world, and there were people he was rushing to save everywhere. Yu Qianqiu looked at Ziyi and saw that she still had the greedy look of admiring the first beauty in the world. He suddenly rolled his eyes and thought, "Do you know what a beauty is?" What made Yu Qianqiu most curious was what the first beauty in the world looked like. She could actually make so many knowledgeable masters in the cultivation world flock to her. If there was a chance, he must go and see her. He thought that Nongzhu had seen the first beauty in the world and was familiar with her. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but imagine in his heart. From the precedent of that guy flirting with Jasper Flower Fairy, it could be seen that Nongzhu was very picky and good at choosing women. Could it be that he liked Lu Yanqing and kicked Jasper Flower Fairy? That was a very possible thing. Master, since your life has been extended by 200 years, why do you still want to risk your life in the Eastern Holy Land? Yu Qianqiu asked. When he thought of Nongzhu going to Shenzhen Island to invite the Nanming ancestor, he thought of the reason why Bai Changchun asked the Nanming ancestor to refine an artifact. He had already said that it was to prepare for the trip to the Eastern Holy Land. Bai Changchun looked back at him and smiled, but didn't explain further. He just said, "Why don't you postpone your trip to the various countries? First, take a look at the Jade Archive I gave you. If you can master the information in it, it will be very beneficial for your future journey." Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he heard this. He took out the Jade Archive again and inserted his divine sense into it. The more he looked at it, the more confused he became. There was no peerless Shen skill or incantation like he had imagined. Instead, it was filled with all kinds of birds and beasts. There were so many of them, it was a dazzling sight. To put it bluntly, it was a dazzling sight. However, there were words beside each bird and beast, which summarized the movement patterns of those birds and beasts, and then transformed them into movements that could be learned by humans. Yu Qianqiu looked at it. Why did it feel like the tiger and crane dual forms martial arts he had seen in his previous life? It was definitely not an incantation. After he retracted his divine sense, he asked doubtfully, "Master, what kind of incantation is this? Why can't I understand it?" Ziyi, who was at the side, pouted slightly as if saying, "I'm afraid you're not talented enough. If you can't understand it, you might as well just give it to me." Cultivation is not something that is innate. It is something that is accumulated through cultivation. Your cultivation is shallow, so it is impossible for me to help you reach the heavens in a single step. However, when facing an enemy, the level of one's cultivation is important, but it is definitely not the only key to victory or defeat. Treasures, the mysteriousness of incantations, and the ability to adapt to the enemy are also indispensable. You won't deny this, will you? Bai Changchun asked. Yes, I rely on the mysteriousness of incantations to defeat stronger opponents. Yu Qianqiu nodded. Ziyi, who was at the side, was also listening attentively. She did not want to miss a single word. Hearing this, she nodded as well. In terms of the mysteriousness of incantations, the water and fire incantations are truly miraculous. Almost no one in this world can surpass you. To increase your cultivation, you need to rely on your own hard work and accumulation. As for treasures, I don't have them with me. The only thing I can teach you is the ability to adapt to the enemy. Bai Changchun pointed at the Jade Archive in his hand and smiled faintly. I understand the mysteriousness of heaven and earth. All my adaptability is integrated into the Jade Archive in your hand. Ziyi's eyes shone brightly. She stared at the Jade Archive in Yu Qianqiu's hand. She almost wanted to snatch it. Yu Qianqiu looked at the Jade Archive in his hand and opened his mouth. He really did not know what to say. Could it be that his comprehension was too poor and he could not understand it? Bai Changchun nodded and said, I have experienced countless battles. In my early years, I have also faced situations where I defeated stronger opponents. I did not rely on treasures, nor did I rely on the mysteriousness of incantations or the depth of my cultivation. Instead, I relied on my strong adaptability. In a battle, if I can avoid a fatal blow at a critical moment, I will be victorious. In an impossible situation, if I can deal a fatal blow to my opponent, I will also be victorious. This is the ability to adapt to the enemy. I understand what Master is saying. Yu Qianqiu held the Jade Archive in his hand and said in a low voice, This? Master, did you take the wrong Jade Archive? These are all about birds and beasts. That's right. Bai Changchun raised his hand slightly and interrupted him. In this world, the adaptability of birds and beasts is the best adaptability of natural selection. For example, the timing of the attack of a goshawk hunting a rabbit requires extraordinary acuity. This is not something an ordinary person can achieve. If you can familiarize yourself with everything recorded in this Jade Archive, you will naturally discover the beauty of it when the time comes. I have spent hundreds of years perfecting this with my blood and sweat. Hearing this, Ziyi seemed to be deep in thought. Although Yu Qianqiu understood what he meant, he still felt that it was a little out of place and that it was inappropriate for him to say anything more. Seeing that he was still confused, Bai Changchun reminded him, once you have familiarized yourself with it, when you face an enemy, you will realize that no matter how powerful an expert is with your acute senses, they will still be full of flaws in your eyes. Regardless of whether you can win or not, whether you can attack, defend, or evade, you will already have a 70% confidence in your heart. You must know that in critical moments, the slightest difference can lead to a huge error. It is often the moment of victory and defeat, the moment of life and death. To be able to predict the enemy's moves, is this not enough for you to use for the rest of your life? Damn. You should have said so earlier. You talked about eagles and rabbits. I thought you had drawn an animal world to teach me to love wild animals. Yu Qianqiu looked as if he had suddenly realized something. But to say that he had truly understood everything was not necessarily true. But he remembered that as long as he was familiar with it, he would be able to predict the enemy's moves. That would be amazing. At critical moments it would be of great use. Thank you, Master, for fulfilling my wish. Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully with a face full of joy. He stood up and asked, "May I know the name of this technique that Master has imparted to me?" Bai Changchun paused for a moment. After thinking for a while he said, "It can't really be considered a technique. This is the first time I've come up with it and it doesn't have a name yet. Since it comes from birds and beasts, let's call it animal play." Chapter 449. Animal Tricks? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He immediately thought of the words animal tricks, but felt that it had tarnished his future student. Hence, he quickly thought of the 5 animal tricks he had heard of in his previous life. It seemed that the fellow named Hua Tua had also created these tricks based on animals. He immediately felt more at ease. This disciple shall diligently comprehend them. Yu Qianqiu immediately bowed and retreated. When he found out that the world of animals in this jade archive would be of great benefit to him, he made up his mind to learn them, and he would learn them with all his might. He didn't have many good points, but he was able to endure hardships and was ruthless to himself. He comforted himself by saying that this was called making up for one's lack of talent with diligence. Once he left, Zi couldn't stay still any longer. She dawdled to Bai Changchun's side and stammered, "Senior Bai, my master has already gone to invite the southern Ming ancestor for you. Can Zi learn the animal tricks you taught Yu Qianqiu?" Towards the end, she seemed to feel a little embarrassed, and her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Fortunately, Bai Changchun's cultivation level was high, and his hearing was good as well. He nodded at her. Zi was so happy that she almost jumped up. She quickly bowed and said, "Zi thanks Senior Bai for his help. Zi will take her leave now." After she finished speaking, she slipped away and went to look for Yu Qianqiu. Bai Changchun smiled, then went to his usual seat and sat down cross-legged. Actually, when Nongzhu suggested letting Zi learn, he had never thought of rejecting her due to their relationship. Otherwise, with the things that Yu Qianqiu had obtained from the gate of the underworld, it wouldn't be difficult for him to invite the southern Ming ancestor. Hence, he wasn't trying to make things difficult for Nongzhu. It was just that his cultivation level was passable, and his speed was fast, so he asked him to run errands. Once Zi left, she quickly looked around. It had only been a short while, but Yu Qianqiu was nowhere to be seen. How dare he try to hog all the good stuff for himself? How infuriating. He couldn't possibly have escaped from Shuntian Island, could he? Thus, he quickly rose into the sky and circled around in all directions, but he did not see anyone. Given that fellow's cultivation, even if he were to fly away in such a short period of time, it would be impossible for him to escape his line of sight. He immediately deduced that Yu Qianqiu must be hiding somewhere on the island, so he launched a carpet search. Yu Qianqiu had long known that this little girl would not let him go. For the sake of freedom, he hid in the bird's nest that he had built in the past. He held the jade archive in his hands and studied it in detail. Once he had a rough idea of what was going on, he would begin to practice madly. Helplessness Island was only so big, so Zi quickly locked onto the bird's nest. With a flash, she leaped into the nest to take a look. Sure enough, this fellow was hiding here, hugging the jade archive and enjoying it all by himself. "What are you doing here?" Yu Qianqiu cautiously put away the jade archive. "Give it to me." Zi reached out her hand and demanded without hesitation. "Take what?" Yu Qianqiu pretended not to know. Zi glared at him and said, "Hurry up and hand over Elder Bai's animal tricks. Elder Bai has already agreed to let me learn it." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Since she dared to say such words on Obedient Island, his master must have really agreed to it. However, he had yet to learn it. If he gave it to her first, when would it be his turn? He immediately rejected her. "Nonsense. Wait until your master brings the Nanming ancestor here. Are you going to give it to me or not?" Zi gritted her teeth as if she was about to snatch it from him. Yu Qianqiu's expression darkened. "Don't get it wrong. This is Obedient Island, not your purple bamboo forest in the southern seas. It's not your place to be unreasonable. If you dare to cause trouble, my master will kick you out of Obedient Island. His words were a little threatening, but to Zi it was quite effective. You. Zi said angrily, then come with me to reason with Elder Bai. Why should I? My master passed it down to me. Even if you want to learn it, I have to finish learning it first before you can learn it. Yu Qianqiu started to act shamelessly. Although Bai Changchun was sitting in the big house, he knew everything that was going on. Obedient Island hadn't been this lively for a long time. He shook his head and transmitted his voice, Yu Qianqiu, make a copy for her. Yu Qianqiu, who was about to start a big fight, was stunned. He helplessly bowed towards the big house and said, yes, disciple understands. He then turned back to Zi and snorted, my master is merciful and asked me to make a copy for you. Don't mess with me anymore. If I make a mistake, don't blame me. Zi was also stunned. She immediately understood that Bai Changchun transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu, so she also bowed in the direction of the big house. Truth be told, Yu Qianqiu was very displeased. He had painstakingly gone through life and death situations to get to where he was today. It wasn't easy for him to get something from the master of the world's #1 expert. This girl who got in through the back door insisted on sharing the fruits of his labor. It was really infuriating. However, there was nothing he could do about it. He could only take out 2 jade archives and obediently make a copy. After handing the jade archives to Zi, he didn't forget to remind her, Zi, you must remember this well. These are my master's hard work. You can't just pass them on to others. Yes. I understand. I won't let Elder Bai's hard work fall into the hands of others. After Zi received the jade archives, she was very satisfied. At the same time, she thought that Bai Changchun had asked Yu Qianqiu to pass on the message. She decided to carry it out loyally. We need some peace and quiet now. Please don't disturb me anymore. Yu Qianqiu gestured towards the outside of the bird's nest. Ziyi's face was filled with excitement as she grasped the jade archives. With a swoosh, she dashed out of the nest and found a place to comprehend it on her own. Yu Qianqiu finally felt at ease and came to see her. In the end, he found himself hiding in the bird's nest for an entire day and night, forgetting to eat and sleep. Cultivators in the world of cultivators, after more or less training, had a much higher ability to comprehend things than mortals. Yu Qianqiu fumbled around for an entire day before he finally understood the gist of it. The contents of this jade archive were quite different from what he knew in the world of cultivators. It was similar to the martial arts that evolved from the animals he knew in his previous life. However, there were far more types of martial arts than those he had seen in his previous life. This jade archive recorded over 1,000 representative animal movements. After he transformed into his human form and practiced, Bai Changchun added a path for the circulation of his true core to each set of diagrams, perhaps in order to make his movements more similar to those of an animal. He must have put in a lot of effort. Yu Qianqiu was truly impressed by this master of his. He dared to guarantee that this set of diagrams was not only beneficial to cultivators, it could also be used by mortals to strengthen their bodies. It was as if he had created a form of fitness exercise. He just didn't know how effective it would be after he practiced it. Was it really as miraculous as he said? But for the time being he had to believe it. Who told him to be the #1 expert in the world? Without the flame-deficient profound fruit, the soft, flat, and spacious plantation had become a good place for him to practice his martial arts. After memorizing a few sets of corresponding true core circulation paths, he practiced with tigers, eagles, snakes, monkeys, and so on. He seemed to be enjoying himself, but in his heart he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was this something that a cultivator should be doing? However, he didn't know that when his actions fell into Bai Changchun's eyes, Bai Changchun was greatly shocked. An ordinary person would find it hard to accept something that he had created himself. He was afraid that it could be described as unreasonable. He didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu would be able to practice it so quickly. Moreover, he was able to practice it well. Moreover, his body and spirit were similar. His perception was simply extraordinarily high. It was really beyond his expectations. Bai Changchun cried out in his heart. Accepting this disciple was definitely the will of the heavens. A strong sense of satisfaction lingered in his chest. With such a disciple, what more could he ask for? Subconsciously, he had already regarded this disciple as a treasure. He reckoned that if anyone dared to touch Yu Qianqiu now, they would definitely be slaughtered by him without saying a word. How could he know that Yu Qianqiu had seen too many similar movies and TV shows in his previous life? Moreover, because he was in the underworld, in order to better defend himself, he had also learned a lot of martial arts and the like. Although he couldn't be said to be proficient in any of them, he had dabbled in them quite a bit. These things were simply a piece of cake for him. The only difference was that there was true core circulating within his body. I can predict the enemy's moves. I will ruthlessly practice. Old man Bai, don't you dare play with me. Filled with grief and indignation, Yu Qianqiu practiced hard without end. He cursed in his heart, what the hell is this? On the other hand, Ziyi was already confused by the contents of the Jade Archive. After looking at it for the whole day, she still couldn't understand what it was. Her head was filled with confusion and she almost went crazy. What the hell is this? Why is there even a monkey? How is a girl supposed to practice this? It must be Yu Qianqiu, that bastard, messing with me on purpose. With Senior Bai's profound cultivation, how could he have made something like this? So disgusting. There's even a snake. Ziyi jumped out from her hiding place, ready to settle the score with Yu Qianqiu and demand the authentic animal fencing technique back. She didn't even think about why this technique was called animal fencing. When she found Yu Qianqiu practicing hard in the plantation, Ziyi was dumbfounded. She saw Yu Qianqiu pouncing on its prey like a hungry tiger, and spreading its wings like an eagle. When he released his palms, he was full of vigor, and when he extended his claws, he was cunning and forceful. He was so absorbed in his practice that he didn't even notice her. After looking at it for a long time, it was indeed similar to what was recorded in the Jade Archive. It's true. Purple Robe was speechless. She covered her face and left quietly. She was on the verge of crying. On Obedient Island, she found a rather remote place. She took out the Jade Archive and took a look at the eagle style that Yu Qianqiu was practicing. She memorized the path of circulation. Seeing that there was no one around, she gritted her teeth, spread out her arms, and extended her slender jade-like palms. Dance. Dance, dance. It didn't look like an eagle's claw. It looked more like a chicken's claw, but not really. On Obedient Island, no matter how secluded she was, how could she escape Bai Changchun's discerning eyes? After silently observing for a while, Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the big house, shook his head and sighed. Compared to his disciple Yu Qianqiu, Ziyi's comprehension ability was far inferior. He was afraid that even after a long time of grinding, he still wouldn't be able to grasp the essence of the technique. The more Ziyi practiced, the more uncomfortable she felt. She felt as though she was about to collapse. She thought, why isn't it like what Yu Qianqiu is practicing, where he has both body and spirit? Could it be that Senior Bai is teaching him in secret? That must be it. Otherwise, why would I be inferior to him when everyone is practicing at the same time? This won't do. I must look for Yu Qianqiu to practice with me. If there's anything I don't understand, I'll pester him to teach me. Chapter 450. Xian Island was also in the East Sea, but it was very far away. It was located in the middle of the vast sea. Although it was isolated, Its name was well known to some people because the owner of the island was one of the 4 great men of the cultivation world, Nanming ancestor. His craftsmanship was extraordinary, and he was the one and only craftsman in the cultivation world. Countless experts in the cultivation world had bent down to beg him for a treasure refined by him. Even the #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun, was no exception. Between the blue sea and the blue sky, there was a vast continent that was shrouded in white fog all year round. Even the wind could not blow it away. Speaking of the name of this continent, it was more famous in the cultivation world than Xianshan Island. The cultivation world called it the Holy East Land. Because it was not far from the Holy East Land, Xianshan Island was shrouded in white fog all year round. It was difficult to see the whole island clearly. However, it was different from the calm Holy East Land. Shrouded in white fog, Xianshan Island shone with red light all year round, dyeing the white fog red. The sound of metal hitting never stopped. High up in the sky, Nongzhu stood with his arms folded, staring at the endless Holy East Land shrouded in white fog. A rare look of caution appeared on his angular face. Thinking that Bai Changchun might not be able to return after entering this place, he could not help but sigh. Although he understood, he still could not figure out why Bai Changchun had to do this. Was he tired of living? Was it not good to live a carefree life? Why did he have to pursue so many things? Looking at Xianshan Island shrouded in red fog, Nongzhu took out a purple and black bamboo flute. The flute hole was placed horizontally by his lips, and his 10 fingers vibrated. In an instant, the melodious sound of the flute drifted from the blue sky to the vast sea. Not long after, from the red fog below, a deafening roar of a dragon suddenly came. A red light pierced through the red fog and shot toward Nongzhu at an extremely fast speed. Nongzhu put away his flute with a smile. As the red light approached, he saw that it was a huge red flying dragon with a wingspan of nearly 20 meters and a body length of nearly 20 meters. The man and the dragon stopped in the air and stared at each other. The wyvern had a ferocious appearance and a huge body. Sharp claws were spread out under its 2 strong thighs, and its long tail was swaying gently. A pair of fleshy wings were flapping in the wind, and its whole body was hairless and bright red. It stared at Nongzhu fiercely with bright eyes and flew higher than Nongzhu. As it breathed, it spat out provocative flames from time to time. Looking at the man and the dragon, it seemed that this was not the first time they had met. The relationship between the two of them did not seem to be very good. This was the mount of Nanming ancestor, the fire dragon. If Yu Qianqiu saw it, he would definitely be very surprised. This was exactly the same as the dragons in the Western legends in his previous life. Roar! The flying dragon suddenly roared at Nongzhu. It then spat out a ball of fierce fire towards Nongzhu. "Little bastard, you're so vengeful. You're asking for a beating?" Nongzhu shouted. A transparent protective upstanding qi gushed out, and the fierce flame was not damaged at all. The flute in his hand turned into a huge shadow, and he swung it at the ferocious dragon's head. Bang! After a loud sound, there was a cry of pain. The fire in the wyvern's mouth could no longer be spat out, but its whole body pounced towards Nongzhu, and its fierce claws went straight for her. "Little bastard." Nongzhu chuckled and teleported away. She stood on the huge head of the wyvern, grabbed the horn on its head with one hand, and hit its head with the flute. Immediately there was a chaotic roar in the air. The wyvern spun and dived down. It swung its head to both sides, hoping to get rid of Nongzhu. With Nongzhu's cultivation, how could she get rid of him? No matter how the angle changed, Nongzhu stood firmly on the top, and hit the wyvern with the flute in his hand again and again. Suddenly there was a sudden sound of wind from both sides. The black armor spikes at the end of the 2 huge fleshy wings fiercely stabbed towards each other. "Little bastard, you've learned to play dirty. Sneak attack." Nongzhu quickly dodged and once again shot up into the sky. Although the wyvern was huge, its speed was extremely fast and its strength was also very strong. Ordinary cultivators at the end of the heavens test were no match for it. In addition, its skin was rough and its flesh was thick, so it was very resistant. The strength of Nongzhu's flute just now could even collapse a small mountain, but this fellow was not hurt at all. Could be seen how resistant it was. However, it was not that Nongzhu could not deal with it, and it was not difficult to kill it. The key was that if he killed the Mount of Elder Nanming, the old man would definitely fight him to the death. Therefore he could only teach it a lesson, not kill it. "Who bullied my mount?" A loud shout came from Xianshan Island, shaking the sky. Hearing this, the wyvern immediately became spirited, and quickly chased up into the sky, as if it would not stop until it was dead. In the sky, Nongzhu shouted coldly, "Old man Nanming, don't give me that. Don't tell me you don't know who I am. If you don't ask your little bastard to stop, I guarantee that your Shenzhen island will have more meat than you can eat for a month. Immediately, a depressed shout came from below, Hong Hong, come back. Hearing this, the wyvern roared at Nongzhu to express its unwillingness, and quickly turned around and rushed back into the red mist. Nongzhu waved her hand in greeting. The voice came again, Nongzhu, what are you doing here? Of course I'm looking for you. Nongzhu smiled and flew down. The person below seemed to remember something unpleasant, and immediately shouted angrily, get lost. I don't welcome you here. Do you think I want to come to this place where even birds don't shit? I was forced to come here under Bai Changchun's orders. Bai Changchun asked you to come find me? After the person below asked, there was no more sound. Nongzhu passed through the red mist and landed on the island. The entire Shenzhen island was not small and it was located like a cone. Although it was called an island, it was actually no different from a mountain. The upper half was bare and there were almost no weeds. There were many holes dug by people. However, the lower half was densely wooded and it looked verdant. Nongzhu looked around and suddenly laughed, Nanming, old man, long time no see. She walked towards an old man not far away, wearing only a pair of red underpants. The old man was barefooted and his face was old, but he had a body full of strong muscles and his skin was bronze. His face was full of beard and every strand of hair stood straight like a hedgehog. The most spectacular thing was that his hair, beard and eyebrows were all scarlet red, and his underpants were also red. He really looked like a strange person. The red wyvern was sitting obediently behind him. It doesn't matter if we never meet again. Nanming Patriarch snorted. Old man, you're so stingy. Didn't I just eat some of your food? But then again, the seed of your fiery rock vajra tasted really good. It was really a delicacy in the world and it left an endless aftertaste. Besides, I wasn't the only one who ate it. As Nongzhu spoke, she licked her lips and looked around as if she was looking for that fiery rock vajra. When he heard this, Nanming Patriarch's eyes widened, and he suddenly turned around to glare at the wyvern behind him. Although the wyvern was huge, it looked like a child who had done something wrong, and it hung its head down resentfully. If you have anything to say, just say it. I don't have the patience to chat with you. Nanming Patriarch roared. At this moment, a young man and woman walked out of the cave on the island. The woman held a robe in her hands and the man held a pair of hemp shoes. They helped Nanming Patriarch put them on. TSK. Nanming, old man, I heard that you took in 2 more disciples. Are they these 2? Nongzhu looked at the man and woman, and realized that they were quite handsome, much better looking than Nanming Patriarch. She couldn't help but smile and said, I'm Nongzhu from the South Sea's Purple Bamboo Forest. You 2 juniors can come to my place to play when you're free. My place is much prettier than your Shenzhen island. When the woman saw such a handsome and elegant person like Nongzhu staring at her, she couldn't help but blush. She looked away shyly, and when she suddenly heard that this person introduced himself as Nongzhu, she was immediately stunned. She exchanged a glance with the man and immediately stood behind Nanming ancestor without looking sideways, ignoring Nongzhu. The 2 of them had heard from their senior brothers and sisters that this person was one of the people their master hated the most. It was said that the fiery rock vajra on the island was laying eggs, and coincidentally, Nongzhu came. When their master wasn't paying attention, this person colluded with the fire dragon to steal and eat the eggs, almost causing the fiery rock vajra on the island to go extinct. After that, he ran away, and the fire dragon was severely punished by their master. I say, Nanming, old man, why is your disciple as rude as you? He didn't even greet his senior, Nongzhu said unhappily. Stop talking nonsense. Is it because the flame-deficient profound fruit on Obedient Island has matured, and Bai Changchun sent you to find me? Nanming Patriarch asked as he tidied up his clothes. It seemed that he was ready to go to Obedient Island at any time. Nongzhu heard this and immediately laughed. Don't mention the flame-deficient profound fruit. Old Bai was too excited and let out a long roar. As a result, the entire Obedient Island was in a mess, and all the flame-deficient profound fruits were destroyed. Bai Changchun was too excited? Nanming Patriarch was stunned. He couldn't understand. For someone like Bai Changchun, his state of mind was as calm as ancient water. It would be difficult for anything to stimulate him. It's all because of that precious disciple of his. One old and one young, 2 madmen together, they are a perfect match. Nongzhu said with a wink. Her expression seemed to be telling Nanming Patriarch that he should go and take a look. Is it that person called Healy? Nanming Patriarch was filled with anger just now, but now that Nongzhu's curiosity was aroused, He couldn't help but ask again. Really? You still remember him? Nongju paused and shook her head. That guy was too cautious. How could he be qualified to be Old Bai's precious disciple? He was already killed by Old Bai's current disciple. Old Bai's current disciple is incredible. He's a complete troublemaker, but Old Bai still treats him like a treasure. Bai Changchun took in a disciple? Nanming Patriarch was also a little surprised. He then realized that the conversation had gone off topic. He frowned and said, "Since the flame-deficient profound fruit has been destroyed, why did he still ask you to find me? My rules can't be broken or there will be endless trouble. You should go back and ask him to plant the flame-deficient profound fruit again. I won't see you out." He directly asked the guest to leave. Chapter 451. Nongju immediately rolled her eyes and said, "Nanming old man, we are friends. You don't have to be so ruthless after eating something from you." "Friends?" Nanming ancestor snorted. "Have you ever seen a friend who steals from a friend?" Nongju looked at the two disciples behind him and opened her mouth, speechless. She awkwardly took out the sky-swallowing beast's fang and waved it in her hand. "I know your stupid rules. You should also know Old Bai's character. He won't make things difficult for you. What do you think of this?" Xian Island was a volcanic island, so the temperature where everyone stood was quite high. However, once the black fang was taken out, the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped a few degrees, and an inexplicable eerie feeling rose from Nongju's hand. Nanming ancestor's head, which was looking at the sky, slowly turned around stiffly. His gaze fell on the fang, and his eyes gradually narrowed into a line, unable to move away. Nongju's slightly tense expression relaxed. Her eyebrows twitched and the corner of her mouth curled into a smile. She was worried that this fellow's standards were too high, and he wouldn't take her seriously. Now it seemed that she could successfully complete Old Bai's task. "Can you do it or not? Just say it. If not, I'll leave lest you roll your eyes at me." Nongju pretended to put away the thing in her hand. "Wait." Ancestor Nanming let out a loud cry and snatched the item from Nongju's hand at lightning speed. Once the thing touched his hand, there was a cold and eerie feeling lingering between his fingers. He couldn't help but put it in front of his eyes to observe. It was dark and crooked. From the cross-section of the fracture, it seemed to have been cut from something. It should be a small part of something. "I've never seen this material before. What is it?" Nanming ancestor stared at the thing in his hand and asked. "You're asking me?" Nongju pointed at herself and curled her lips. "How would I know what it is? If you want to ask, you should ask Old Bai. This thing belongs to him. The yin qi on this thing is bone-piercing and it doesn't dissipate. It doesn't look like it's acquired. It shouldn't be something from the mortal world. Otherwise there's no way I wouldn't recognize it." Old ancestor Nanming suddenly raised his head and said, "Judging from its appearance, it should be a small part cut off from some huge item. Nongju, tell me honestly, where did you get this thing? No wonder you're a grand master of equipment refining. You can tell the truth at a glance." Nongju gave him a thumbs up, then walked to him and put one hand on his shoulder. Nanming ancestor shook his shoulder abruptly and flung his hand away. He glared at him and shouted, "What a scandal it is to have your arms around someone else's shoulder." Nongju looked him up and down and retorted, "You are a guy who wears red underpants all year round. How dare you talk about decency with me? If you want to know where this thing came from, hurry up and give me the ear." As he spoke, he placed his arm on ancestor Nanming's shoulder again. This time ancestor Nanming did not resist. This commotion was witnessed by the two disciples, causing them to look at each other in surprise. The two of them faintly felt that their master must have had a close relationship with Mr. Nongju in the past. Otherwise they wouldn't have acted so intimately. "Ninth Netherworld Cave," Nongju said softly with a smile. In fact, he didn't have to do this. If he wanted to whisper, he could just send a voice transmission. However, he thought that taking the opportunity to get closer could more or less repair the relationship between the two of them. He especially wanted to let Nanming old ancestors' disciples know that his relationship with their master was not ordinary. In the future when he came they must not be impolite. "Ah." Nanming ancestor looked at the thing in his hand and shook his head. No wonder, no wonder. Bai Changchun is sitting on a blessed land." Nongju's arm had unknowingly wrapped around his shoulder. The two of them were like good brothers. There were busy disciples going in and out of the cave from time to time on Xian Island. Obviously there were also old people who knew Nongju. After seeing this scene they were all shocked. It turned out that the relationship between their master and Nongju was still very close. "This is nothing. Let me tell you something even more shocking." Nongzhu touched Nanming ancestor's bearded old face and pulled his head to her mouth. She whispered into his ear again, "You guessed it right. The thing in your hand is indeed not something from the mortal world. It was taken from the netherworld gate of the 9th netherworld cave. Do you understand?" As she said this, she let go of Nanming ancestor and patted his broad shoulder heavily. "Ah, from the underworld," Nanming ancestor exclaimed. But before he could finish, he was interrupted by Nongzhu. "What are you shouting for? Are you afraid that others won't know? What old Bai took out is not something ordinary people can compare with." That's right, that's right." Nanming ancestor touched the thing in his hand and nodded. Nongzhu patted his shoulder again and said proudly, "How about it? Come with me to Shuntian Island. Old Bai still has this thing." "Okay, let me make some preparations." After saying this, Nanming teleported and disappeared, taking the Fong with him. Done. Nongzhu rubbed her hands in satisfaction. At this time, she was in the mood to look around and found that the surrounding environment had not changed. She looked at the two disciples of Nanming ancestor, then stared at the flying dragon and said with a smirk, "Little Hong Hong. Just now he called it a little beast, but now he changed it." The flying dragon was also quite intelligent. It turned its huge head to the side and ignored him. Nongzhu laughed and said, "Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. Go find your master." She teleported and disappeared. The two disciples wanted to say something but stopped. Thinking of Nongzhu and their master's intimate look, they wanted to shout but did not. Nongzhu came to a cave and her familiar figure flashed quickly. In the blink of an eye, she arrived at the bottom of the mountain of Xianshan Island. A grand scene of steaming hot air appeared in front of her. In the center was fiery red magma, swallowing and spitting earth fire. The surroundings were filled with the continuous clanking of metal. A large group of people were busy. They were all disciples of Nanming ancestor, refining weapons with the help of the earth fire. What attracted Nongzhu's attention the most was the big crab mixed in the crowd. The fiery red crab had a body diameter of 2 meters. It had 4 pairs of strong limbs that were like diamond thorns, supporting its entire body. It was also 2 meters tall. It was waving a pair of giant pincers that were also 2 meters long, hitting the red-hot metal like a hammer. Sparks flew in all directions with great strength. This big crab was called Fiery Rock Vajra. It was the thing that made Nanming ancestor and Nongzhu fall out. This creature was quite intelligent and extremely strong. Unlike ordinary crabs, this kind of fiery rock Vajra did not live in the sea. Instead, it lived in volcanic karst caves. Could swim and climb in volcanic magma. It was not afraid of high or low temperatures. It would only come out to hunt for food. The lifespan of cinder-classed Vajras was not very long. They could live up to 200 years at most. Female crabs would only lay 10 precious eggs before they died. Therefore, the population of the entire colony had always been stable. It was impossible to increase it even if one wanted to. They were unique to Xianshan Island. Originally, there were about 500 of them. After Nanming ancestor discovered them, he tamed them for his own use. The main purpose was to make them use their incomparable strength to forge artifacts. Forging artifacts was a hard job. After all, places like Bai Changchun's demon ghost region with green fire couldn't be everywhere. The extraordinary power of the green fire could melt metal quickly. Then it could be molded and forged at will with a high cultivation base. However, ordinary earth fire did not have that kind of power. Naturally, it had to be forged. Thus, fiery rock Vajra came in handy. It saved time and effort when used with people. However, these treasures in Nanming ancestors' eyes were almost annihilated when they encountered Nongzhu. The story began when Nanming ancestor was entangled by cultivators from various countries. At that time he happened to meet Nongzhu. Nongzhu was warm-hearted. In order to help her friend, she invited the world's #1 expert, Bai Changchun, to solve the problem for him. Thus, Nongzhu became Nanming ancestor's good friend and often came to Xianshan Island to play. At that time, Nongzhu was the only person in the cultivation world who could enter and leave Xianshan Island at will. 60 years ago, a batch of fiery rock Vajra had just started laying eggs. The eggs were the size of a fist. They were red and shiny and looked very beautiful. There were only about 100 of them. Nanming ancestor regarded them as a treasure and sent his mount, a flying dragon, to watch over the incubation. Coincidentally, Nongzhu came again. Nanming ancestor spoke out of turn and said that before he subdued fiery rock Vajra, he had eaten an egg. The taste was simply unparalleled in the world. When Nongzhu heard this, she immediately became indignant. She pestered Nanming ancestor relentlessly and insisted on having a taste. In the end, old ancestor Nanming was forced into a corner. For the sake of his friend, he endured the pain and gave one to him. After Nongzhu ate it, he exclaimed that it was delicious. However, this one made him addicted to it and he could not stop eating it. Later on, no one knew what method he used, but he actually instigated the flying dragon that was guarding the incubation of the crab eggs to steal it. The man and the dragon ate heartily and enjoyed themselves. In reality, Nongzhu only ate about 7 or 8 of them. The main reason was that the eggs were too big. If she ate too much, she would die. However, the flying dragon liked to eat things of the fire attribute. The fiery rock Vajra's egg was just to its liking. Once it ate it, it could not stop. Needless to say, the big fellow's appetite was almost completely devoured by this silly dragon. After that, the man and the dragon were dumbfounded when they realized that there were no crab eggs left. Needless to say, the consequences were obvious. Nanming ancestor flew into a rage and Nongzhu hurriedly left. They had not been here for decades. The flying dragon, who could not escape, was in a miserable state. It was almost skinned alive. This was also the reason why the flying dragon immediately took action when it saw Nongzhu, a fellow who shared blessings with others and was extremely disloyal. At this moment, Nongzhu felt guilty when she saw the remaining 100 or so fiery rock Vajra. However, when she thought of the delicious crab eggs, it was simply an endless aftertaste. She could not help but secretly look around, not knowing if it was the time for them to lay eggs. Just as she was about to look around, she suddenly heard Nanming ancestor's earth-shaking roar from outside. "Old thief Nongzhu, why are you not showing yourself? Are you thinking of stealing from my Shenshen island again?" It was followed by the angry roar of the flying dragon. Chapter 452. The 2 words Nongzhu were famous on Shenshen Island. When Patriarch Nanming roared, the 9 bens and 18 bens gathered below and rumbled, waking everyone up. The busy people at the bottom of the mountain quickly looked around, and their eyes all fell on Nongzhu. Nongzhu had many acquaintances here. After all, she used to hang around here often. "Ah, long time no see. You guys are busy." Nongzhu waved at the crowd with a smile. Just as she turned around, her face darkened and she quickly ran away. As soon as she came out of the cave, she shouted, "Old Nanming, what are you shouting for? I won't take your scrap metal even if you give it to me." The 2 stood less than half a meter apart. Their eyes met and sparks flew. Nongzhu clenched her teeth and stretched out her hand, shouting, "Give me back my things." "When did I take your things?" Ancestor Nanming spat. Nongzhu wiped the saliva off her face and said, "Old Bai asked me to bring them. You took them just now. Bai Changchun gave it to me. You're just a messenger. Since when did it become yours?" Nanming Grand Elder wiped the saliva off his face as well. He turned around and shouted at the flying dragon, "Let's go." The flying dragon shot up into the sky. Ancestor Nanming caught up with it and landed firmly on the dragon's back. The flying dragon quickly passed through the fog. Nongzhu leaped into the air and caught up to him. She stood side by side with Nanming ancestor without hesitation. Both of them let out a cold snort at the same time. The flying dragon was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a black dot in the distant sky. Crossing the vast demon ghost region, Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming rode on the flying dragon and arrived at the sky above Shantian Island. Bai Changchun's voice rang in the sky, "Nanming, my brother, you have graced my Shantian Island with your presence." As he spoke, Bai Changchun's thin and elegant figure appeared outside the big house. An expert came to greet them personally. 2 figures flashed down. Ancestor Nanming cupped his hands and bowed, "I dare not." His temper could be considered bad in the cultivation world, but when he saw Bai Changchun he still performed the basic etiquette properly. He did not dare to be presumptuous in front of the world's #1 expert. Nongzhu looked at the direction of the plantation suspiciously and asked, "Old Bai, what happened to Zi?" When he was still in the air, he saw Zi baring her fangs and brandishing her claws, jumping and jumping like a madman. Bai Changchun ignored him and waved at Nanming ancestor, "Please come in." Grandmaster Nanming expressed his gratitude. He raised his head and shouted at the flying dragon, "Find a place and stay obediently. Don't disturb the peace of Obedient Island." Then he entered the house with Bai Changchun. The dragon in the sky let out a low roar, turned around, and obediently landed in a corner of the Obedient Island. Nongzhu, on the other hand, teleported to the abandoned plantation. She saw that Zi had been doing strange things. She did not even notice that he was standing beside her for a long time. She was tormented until she was drenched in sweat. Nongzhu was startled and asked, "Zi, what are you doing?" Zi suddenly stopped. When she turned around and saw it was her master, she immediately burst into tears. She threw herself into Nongju's arms and cried her heart out. Nongju's heart suddenly tightened. He patted his daughter's shoulder and comforted her. "Zi, what's wrong? Did someone bully you?" "You Qianqiu," Zi choked with sobs. Nongju's eyes widened and he shouted angrily, "You Qianqiu, you son of a b***, how dare you bully Zi? Get out of here." This shout was no less than a sudden clap of thunder. It immediately provoked Bai Changchun's sonorous rebuke. "Nongju, what do you want?" Although his voice was not as loud as Nongju's, the sonorous demon-subduing power hit Nongju without missing a single word, shaking people's hearts. Ancestor Nan Ming, who was sitting cross-legged with Bai Changchun in the house, suddenly felt happy in his heart. He casually said, "This guy is not a good guy." As soon as he finished his words, even he found that he was a little suspicious of fanning the flames. He immediately changed his words. "Who is Yu Qianqiu?" "It is my disciple's name," Bai Changchun said in a tone that hid some complacency. Ancestor Nan Ming made a long "oh" sound, but he remembered this name in his heart. A disciple who could make Bai Changchun proud must be an extraordinary person. He nodded and said, "Brother Bai's disciple must be a talent. I would like to see it." "Ah, Brother Nan Ming, you are a little late. My disciple has already left a day earlier," Bai Changchun said with a smile. Ziyi, who was at the plantation, stopped crying when she heard Bai Changchun's anger. She pulled Nongju, whose face was pale, and said, "Master, he did not bully me. Did he say that I am stupid?" Nongju said angrily, "How can my disciple be stupid? No matter how stupid she is still smarter than him." Her expression suddenly became distorted. She turned her head and asked, "He only said that you are stupid and you cried like this?" Ziyi hung her head and said sadly, "Senior Bai taught us the same incantation. My speed of understanding is indeed not as fast as his, so I begged him to teach me. In the end, not long after teaching, he said that he could not stand me. He said that I was too stupid to be carved, so he left me alone and left the demon region." Nongju was stunned when she heard this. She was happy and worried at the same time. She was happy because Bai Changchun was really generous and really taught her daughter the incantation. She was worried because she felt that her daughter was a little dependent on Yu Qianqiu. This was a bad omen. The cultivation method created by Bai Changchun could be said to be unprecedented in this world. Ziyi was dumbfounded when she saw it. She had no idea how to learn it. Therefore Ziyi, who almost broke down, pestered Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yu Qianqiu almost broke down because of Ziyi. He found that this woman was simply a donkey who could not be taught no matter what. However, Ziyi kept pestering him and he could not get rid of her. Originally, he wanted to wait for Elder Nan Ming to come and see the scene of refining the spiritual treasure. Later, he heard from Bai Changchun that refining the spiritual treasure would take a month to prepare. Yu Qianqiu could not wait any longer. Finally, when Ziyi pestered him again, he scolded Ziyi. Then he brazenly said goodbye to Bai Changchun. Every move of the two was under Bai Changchun's control. Bai Changchun deeply understood his disciple's pain. He was an extremely talented person. If he had to teach Ziyi like this, he would also be angry. Therefore he agreed to Yu Qianqiu's departure. At the same time he gave a few words to Yu Qianqiu. If you really encounter a soul formation cultivator who deliberately makes things difficult for you, try your best to resolve it. If you really can't resolve it, you might as well tell me your master's name. I want to see who dares to touch you. His words were full of killing intent. Bai Changchun made 3 communication jade pendants on the spot and gave them to Yu Qianqiu. These things could not really send messages. They only hid a strand of Bai Changchun's divine sense in each of them. In other words, if something really happened to Yu Qianqiu, once he crushed the jade pendant, Bai Changchun would immediately know where his disciple was in trouble. Perhaps because the distance was too far, Bai Changchun would not be able to arrive in time with his cultivation. However, the place where Yu Qianqiu was in trouble would be earth-shattering. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed as he held the jade pendant and left. Motherf *her, now it was clear that Yu Qianqiu was letting him do whatever he wanted. However, although he was happy, he still knew one thing. These 3 jade pendants could not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. If he took them out and used them for such a trivial matter, it would be an insult to his ability. Before leaving the demon ghost region, Yu Qianqiu chatted with Yu Ji again and asked her to cultivate in peace. After leaving the demon ghost region, he found a hidden place and disappeared. He had not returned to Utopia for a long time. The moment Yu Qianqiu appeared, he stood beside Bai Suzhen. Bai Suzhen was not surprised. She knew that he was the only one who could suddenly appear beside her in utopia. She raised her head and smiled sweetly at him. She put down the green destiny sword in her hand and stood up to ask softly, "You're here?" Yu Qianqiu nodded. He looked at that calm and gentle face and was unwilling to shift his gaze away for a long time. The moment he saw her, he felt his entire body and mind completely relax. At this moment he was his true self. It was like this every time. He was influenced by her and became like her, without any desires. She did not have any requests for him, nor did she have any ties to him. She would not even throw a tantrum with him. There was only understanding and support without any reservations. Everything was done in silence and she would never have any regrets. "I really want to keep this sword, but I know you won't be happy. My heart hurts to have you suffer like this. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have given this sword to you." Yu Qianqiu looked at the green destiny sword on the bed and shook his head with a bitter smile. "Since you know I won't be happy, then don't mention it again," Bai Suzhen said softly. She looked at him from head to toe and frowned. "Why are there so many mud on your body?" "I've been practicing a martial art recently. It's all because of the hard work." Yu Qianqiu recalled the process of practicing the animal fencing and had a helpless expression. It seemed like he had not felt any effects until now. "Change into another one. Otherwise your parents and Ping Er will be worried." As Bai Suzhen spoke, she had already leaned over and reached out to help him remove his outer clothes. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu took out a new set of clothes from his storage bag. After removing the dirty clothes, Bai Suzhen took the clothes from his hands and helped him change. After that, both of them had a knowing smile on their faces. Yu Qianqiu opened his arms and said, "Let me hug you." Bai Suzhen looked at him and tilted her head. She raised her hand and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She smiled faintly and leaned into his embrace. Yu Qianqiu gently pulled her into his embrace and buried his head in her hair. He sniffed the faint fragrance and murmured, "I want to jump out of China's cultivation world and travel around." Bai Suzhen felt his heartbeat and had a faint sense of satisfaction on her face. She asked softly, "Do you need me to do anything? As long as I can see you every time I come back, I will have endless motivation outside. This is more important than anything you do." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said with a little enchantment. Bai Suzhen raised her head and said, "I've already helped your parents consume the 7 orifices exquisite pill. It seems to be quite effective. Go and take a look." "Got it." Yu Qianqiu grunted and suddenly asked softly, "You seem to have delegated all the power of Ethereal Palace to Ping Er." "Yes. Is there a problem?" Bai Suzhen asked. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and did not say anything. Chapter 453. The two of them walked out of Ethereal Palace side by side. Their temperaments reflected each other, and the palace maids they encountered bowed to them. To them, their leader's status in Utopia was needless to say. As for Sister Bai, who lived in seclusion, be it in terms of temperament or appearance, she was unique in Utopia. Her clothes were as white as snow all year round, and she was as elegant as a snow lotus on an iceberg. Although Sister Bai didn't interfere with anything in Ethereal Palace or Utopia, she controlled the lifeline of the entire Utopia. Everyone's primordial spirits were in her hands. Even Chief Instructor Guan, who controlled the entire Utopia military, would come to greet her from time to time. That respectful attitude was something he didn't have even when he met the current person in charge of Ethereal Palace, Chu Ping. There was also Chief Chen, who was usually sparse. When he saw the gentle Sister Bai, he was also very respectful. Once Sister Bai instructed him to do something, he would definitely not hesitate and would not dare to give her any discount. As such, even though Big Sister Bai was tolerant, the people in Utopia who saw her were all filled with respect and fear. The two of them stood in front of the cliff outside Ethereal Palace for a while and chatted for a while before Bai Suzhen left quietly. Not long after, a stream of light streaked over. Chu Ping put away her flying sword in surprise and landed. She punched Yu Qianqiu's chest and said coquettishly, "Why did you only come back once after so long?" Now, on Chu Pinger's face, the haze of the past could no longer be seen. Instead, it was shrouded in bright and vibrant colors, and the way she spoke was more confident. A faint aura of a superior had begun to appear, and she had the image of a strong woman. Needless to say, she was now the master of hundreds of people in Ethereal Palace. Compared to Ong Kwangsung's disciple who could be ordered around, her situation was worlds apart. Now that the entire Utopia knew that she was Yu Qianqiu's woman, no one dared to criticize her. She was the only one who could criticize others. She was very busy every day. Yu Qianqiu grabbed her fist and pulled it into his embrace. He said with a naughty smile, "Did you miss me? TSK. Your body has become even more voluptuous." Annoying. Chu Ping'er shyly raised her other fist and punched him twice, causing Yu Qianqiu to laugh weirdly and grope her all over. Chu Ping'er's face was flushed red. She pushed him away weakly and said, "There's something I need to tell you. Your parents aren't used to living in the Misty Palace, so they moved to Dongguosu's place. I'll accompany you to see them now. There's no need to rush. Let me examine you first." Yu Qianqiu lifted her up forcefully, causing a burst of exclamations. Then the two of them disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already at the lakeside where the two of them first made love. Then their clothes fluttered in the wind and water splashed everywhere. What a pair of mandarin ducks playing in the water. Now Dongguosu also had hundreds of people under him. Planting and breeding went hand in hand, solving the logistics and food supply of the entire utopia. This piece of land was flourishing. When Chu Ping'er and Yu Qianqiu arrived, they immediately found Yu Chang'e and his wife. The two of them were in much better spirits than when they were in the Misty Palace. After careful observation, Yu Qianqiu realized that ordinary mortals would look lethargic when they were over 50 years old. It was a sign that their bodies were failing. Now that his parents' faces were completely devoid of lethargy, it was clear that the elixir had taken effect. This made Yu Qianqiu feel gratified. It should not be a problem for his parents to live for another 50 years. When they met, the family naturally had endless things to talk about. Yu Qianqiu decided to accompany his parents for the entire day. Chu Ping'er temporarily put down her miscellaneous items and acted like a good daughter-in-law. Shui Ernyang was naturally happy, but she was filled with complaints that her daughter-in-law's stomach was not big. Chu Ping'er was extremely shy. From time to time she would secretly glare at Yu Qianqiu, but the latter pretended not to see her. The next day Yu Qianqiu ordered someone to bring him a large pile of spiritual herbs in the Utopia military camp. Then he personally refined a large pile of elixirs. He opened his hands and green flames appeared on his palms. At the same time he cultivated. Guan Yu only needed to be in charge of throwing in the spiritual herbs. His skilled alchemy skills were like child's play, shocking Guan Yu once again. He was indeed much better than the arrogant Chen Feng. When the two of them placed the elixirs into bottles, Guan Yu asked, "What elixirs are you refining?" "Or a concealing elixir. Consuming one can prevent others from seeing through one's cultivation level for 10 days. In the past, I didn't have all the ingredients, but now that I have everything, I naturally have to refine more in one go. Although this thing isn't very effective, it's useful," Yu Qianqiu said as he filled the bottles. Guan Yu picked up a small yellow elixir and looked at it. He did not expect such a magical elixir to exist. He asked curiously, "Your body's talent is abnormal. Others can't see through your cultivation level. Who are you giving so many elixirs to?" He guessed that Yu Qianqiu was going to bring another batch of people out. Yu Qianqiu put away the large pile of bottles in front of the two of them. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the pile of yellow elixirs left on the table. He smiled and said, "The Chinese cultivation world is too tense these days. It makes people feel like they don't know where to start. I'm going to go to other countries." Guan Yu was silent for a while and said, "How many people do you need this time?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, "For the time being, there is no need to use a large number of special forces. You just need to focus on training them. When I have a clear understanding of the situation, I will naturally use them. By the way, help me call Hong Qi and the other two over. Their cultivation has already reached the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. It's time for them to go out and gain experience." Guan Yu nodded and went out. Not long after, he brought back 3 guys in ragged clothes covered in blood. When the 3 saw Yu Qianqiu, they hurriedly bowed. After carefully looking at the 3 people, Yu Qianqiu nodded in satisfaction. The 3 guys had obviously just come down from the actual combat training. From their sorry appearance, it seemed like they had been tossed around quite a bit. The killing intent that had not yet dispersed from the 3 of them was obvious. Even the young boy Hong Qi had a murderous look on his face. He looked like a hungry wolf that had just been released from its cage. "I'll give you a quarter of an hour. Wash up and change your clothes before coming to see me." Yu Qianqiu lightly waved his hand and said. The 3 of them accepted the order and quickly left. Not even a quarter of an hour later, the 3 of them rushed back. After going through training, their behavior was really different. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the pile of elixirs on the table and said, "These are breath-concealing elixirs. After taking one, no one will be able to tell that you are a cultivator for 10 days. Each of you fill up 10 bottles and bring them with you. They will be useful when you go out. He wants to bring us out? The three of them were stunned. They looked at each other and did not dare to say anything. They quickly filled the bottles according to Yu Qianqiu's instructions. Each bottle could contain about 100 elixirs. 10 bottles would be more than 1,000 elixirs. As Yu Qianqiu looked at them, he said, "When you go out this time, Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun will be traveling as itinerant cultivators in China's cultivation world. Remember to change your names so that no one can recognize you. I'll give each of you 30 Special Forces members. Remember to keep a low profile. Otherwise, with your strength, you won't be able to fight those large sections." After the three of them packed the elixirs, Hong Qi asked excitedly, "Master, what do we need to do when we go out?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and pretended to be angry. "Of course, I'm not asking you to go sightseeing. You have a mission this time. I'll give you and Gu Qingyun a year. Each of you has to bring back 100 million superior-grade spirit stones. I don't care if you steal or snatch it. In any case, if you can't complete the mission, I'll punish you severely." Yes. The two of them accepted the order happily. The two of them also knew that Utopia had never let anyone go out to train alone. Such an opportunity was not given to just anyone, and the significance was extraordinary. However, when they thought about how they had to bring back 100 million superior-grade spirit stones each year, they still felt extremely pressured. "Master, what should I do?" Zhang Ping asked with a loud voice. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the tower-like man and asked, "I heard that when you were fighting in the past, you sent out spies to spy on the military. Their disguises are pretty good. I wonder if you know how to do it?" "This is a meticulous job. I don't know how to do it, but the general has many capable people under him," Zhang Ping replied. The general he was referring to was naturally the national pillar general, Shi Wenguang. "Got it?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and looked at the three of them. "I'll give you a day to prepare. If you want people, look for Chief Instructor Guan. If you want things, look for Chief Chen. At this time tomorrow, bring your people and things here to meet me." "Yes." The three of them cupped their fists excitedly and accepted the order. After the three of them left, Guan Yu frowned and said, "Isn't it a little too dangerous to bring back 100 million for each of them? Especially Hong Qi. He has never seen much of the world. Can he do it?" "If you want to survive in the cultivation world, danger is a common thing. How can you be afraid? I've already created certain conditions for them. If they can't even protect their own lives, then they're just trash. If they die, then so be it. I'll replace them as soon as possible," Yu Qianqiu said faintly and disappeared. Guan Yu was left alone with a frown. He knew that Yu Qianqiu was starting to train people who could stand on their own in the outside world. Hong Qi had finally obtained some free time with great difficulty, and as soon as he left the barracks, he swiftly flew to Dongguosu's side to see his maternal grandparents. The old couple, who were busy at the edge of the farmland, saw someone flying towards them. At first, they thought they had seen the wrong person. When they realized it was their grandson, they were dumbfounded. Their grandson was not even 20 years old. How could he have reached the early stage of the tribulation passing stage? After asking and getting confirmation, the old couple was so excited that they were speechless. They thanked Yu Qianqiu profusely. Hong Qi had come to bid farewell to his grandparents. He said that his master wanted him to go out and gain experience. Dongguosu immediately reminded him, "Your master has given our family a new lease of life. It's hard to repay him even if you have to risk your life. In short, as long as it's something your master wants you to do, even if you have to risk your life." "I don't know when I'll be back. Grandpa and Grandma, please take care. I still have something to do. I'll bid farewell now," Hong Qi said as he knelt down and kowtowed. Good. The old couple helped him up emotionally. Hong Qi stepped back and bowed. Then he bounced up and flew away. The old couple stared at him for a long time. They could never reach such a cultivation level in their entire lives. Now that they saw it on their grandson, how could they not be excited? More than 10 people came from all around the farmland. They surrounded the old couple and asked, "This is your grandson? This is the direct disciple of the leader." The old couple's faces were full of pride, but they still spoke modestly. After dealing with the people, the old couple immediately decided to visit Yu Changre and his wife to see if they needed any help. Chapter 454. In the backyard of the pillar of the State General's estate, Yu Qianqiu reclined on a wooden armchair, munching on snacks and sipping tea. After waiting for some time, Shi Xiaotian excitedly returned with a few letters and placed them on the table. Yu Qianqiu was going to the Western military camp, so he wanted to deliver a letter to Shi Xiaotian's family. In fact, the Shi family had never stopped sending letters to the Western military camp. However, they didn't dare to write anything too profound. After all, the supervisory department of a country wasn't just a nobody, especially when it came to a general like Shi Wenguang who had a powerful army. Yu Qianqiu finished the last melon seed in his mouth, then clapped his hands and took out a jade archive. He placed it on the table and said, "The things inside are beneficial to you. I'll be taking my leave first." He then stood up and kept the letters on the table. Shi Xiaotian smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, if you have nothing to do, come often." Unfortunately, his boss was nowhere to be seen. In the Western military camp, the army was training hard. Their shouts shook the heavens as they prepared for war. Sitting in the middle of the camp was a large tent. Loud laughter could be heard, and the atmosphere was very lively. Shi Wenguang sat behind his desk, toasting with the 4 sword-bearing cultivators who sat on either side of him. The topic of their conversation was none other than Yu Qianqiu. Several guards in the tent were also listening attentively. They were none other than the people Yu Qianqiu had sent to protect Shi Wenguang. As they were listening, they suddenly realized that someone else had appeared beside them. They were shocked and were about to make a move, but they saw that it was Yu Qianqiu. Just as they were about to greet him, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, signaling for them to be quiet. He then crossed his arms and continued listening to the conversation outside. Outside the tent, Shi Wenguang held a cup in his left hand and made an inviting gesture with his right. He smiled and said, "Immortal Li, Immortal Zhao, Immortal Qiu and Immortal Wu. I am very grateful that the 4 of you can come and talk about interesting things in the cultivation world with me. Come. Let's have another toast, Immortal Masters." "General, you're too polite." Immortal Master Li wiped his mouth and asked with a smile, "Why is the general so interested in Yu Qianqiu? Every time we come, the general always asks about Yu Qianqiu. Could it be that the general has some relationship with Yu Qianqiu?" Immortal Master Li must be joking. "Although I have a large army under my command, I'm just an ordinary man. How could I have any relationship with Yu Qianqiu? I'm afraid that even if I wanted to climb up the social ladder, he wouldn't be interested in an ordinary man like me." Shi Wenguang laughed heartily. "General, there's no need to belittle yourself. You're a high-ranking official in the secular world. How can you be compared to the cultivation world? Not to mention the fact that Yu Qianqiu is a general, even if we wanted to curry favor with him, I'm afraid he wouldn't even look us in the eye." Immortal Master Wu shook his head and sighed. Shi Wenguang waved his hand and said, "Immortal Master Wu must be joking. You 4 immortal masters are experts who can fly in the sky and travel through the earth. Anyone would look favorably upon you. If I were to guess, you immortal masters are just unwilling to get involved in the struggles of the cultivation world. Brother Wu, you must have drunk too much. That Yu Qianqiu is just a scum who was expelled from the sect twice. Why should we let him look us in the eye?" Immortal Master Zhao's expression was a little unhappy. The 4 of them relied on their status in the cultivation world to interact with the Pillar of State General and often came here to eat and drink for free. How could they say such demeaning words? Wouldn't that be a great loss of face? The guards in the tent all looked at Yu Qianqiu. They only saw a faint smile on Yu Qianqiu's face. He remained unmoved and closed his eyes to listen. No one knew what he was thinking. Shi Wenguang's expression stiffened. He naturally knew that the guards in the tent were sent by Yu Qianqiu. He really didn't know how they would react after hearing this. After waiting for a while, Shi Wenguang raised his cup and smiled. "Immortal Masters, please don't stop. Let's drink." After they drank, Immortal Master Qiu asked the others, "Have you heard? It said that Yu Qianqiu led 600 experts and fought with the Deluo sect in Wanghai town. I wonder if it's true?" The guards in the tent looked at the person in question in surprise. A cold smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He thought to himself, "And here I thought it was some bullshit immortal master. If they can't even figure out this kind of thing, then it goes without saying that they're all useless people. That madman is capable of anything." Immortal Master Li shook his head. Shi Wenguang immediately became spirited. He straightened his back and asked, "Immortal Masters, can you tell me in detail what happened?" Immortal Master Wu smiled bitterly and said, "I have heard of this matter. Yu Qianqiu led more than 600 people and fought with the Deluo sect's 1,000 people in front of all the sections. It was an intense battle to the death." "What was the result?" everyone asked in unison. "The result is unbelievable." Immortal Master Wu shook his head. The Deluo sect, ranked second among the righteous sects, suffered a crushing defeat. Only a few dozen of their 1,000 people were left. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu only lost 200 people. The most shocking thing was that Yu Qianqiu was able to fight against 2 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts by himself. In the end, it was the 2 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts who suffered a loss. Hiss. Everyone gasped. They didn't care about the 1,000 people who died. What they cared about the most was the fact that Yu Qianqiu defeated 2 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts by himself. For them, late-stage tribulation transcendence experts were the pinnacle of experts. Immortal Master Zhao, who previously ridiculed Yu Qianqiu, twitched and asked, "Brother Wu, is this news fake?" "It can't be fake. I heard it personally from a disciple of the Deluo sect. He wouldn't fabricate a scandal about our sect." Immortal Master Wu said with a breath that reeked of alcohol. The scene immediately became silent. Shi Wenguang's eyes flickered with excitement. Yu Qianqiu didn't lie to him. Since he had the ability to fight against the Deluo sect, it was only a matter of time before something big happened. He immediately raised his cup and said, "Immortal Masters, please." Then he drank the cup to show his respect. Immortal Master Zhao clearly felt that he had lost face. After putting down his cup, he snorted and said, "I think this news is probably fake. Think about it. I heard that Yu Qianqiu is only at the nascent soul stage. How could he defeat 2 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts from the Deluo sect by himself?" Everyone looked at each other. After all, they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, so it was hard to say. Even if they said it was fake, they had heard many people talking about it. If they said it was true, it was indeed unimaginable. What if it's true? Someone in the tent suddenly laughed. Shi Wenguang was slightly surprised. This person's voice was too familiar. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu lifted the curtain and slowly walked out. He secretly gave Shi Wenguang, who was about to speak, a look to indicate that he should not speak. He stood beside Shi Wenguang and cupped his hands towards the people below. "I am a cousin of the great general. I heard Immortal Masters talking about it and couldn't help but come out to join in the fun. I hope Immortal Masters won't mind." As he spoke, he looked at the people around him. They were only at the foundation establishment stage, yet they dared to come to his territory and pretend to be experts. They simply didn't know what was good for them. The 4 people looked at Shi Wenguang in confusion. The latter nodded and said with a smile, "Immortal Masters, please don't be suspicious. He is indeed my cousin." Hearing this, the people around him relaxed. What? The great general's cousin is also interested in the matters of the cultivation world? Immortal Master Zhao shook his head and said, "Then let me test you. Do you know how many sects there are in the cultivation world? How many righteous sects and how many demonic sects?" "There should be at least a few hundred," Yu Qianqiu said after thinking for a moment. He discovered that up until now, he really couldn't figure out how many sects there were in the cultivation world. "Yes." Immortal Master Zhao shook his head. He was very dissatisfied with his vague answer. He then asked, "Then do you know how many loose cultivators there are in the cultivation world?" The other 3 Immortal Masters also looked at Yu Qianqiu with smiles. It seemed that they were bored drinking and wanted to use the great general's cousin to liven things up. Damn it. These questions really stump me. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "Nowadays there aren't many loose cultivators in the cultivation world who are presentable. I don't care how many there are." As soon as he said this, the 4 Immortal Masters' expressions immediately changed. Immortal Master Zhao slammed his wine cup on the table and shouted angrily, "Little brat, you're making irresponsible remarks. If it wasn't for the great general's face, I'd definitely teach you a lesson today." Shi Wenguang, who was sitting in the middle, was speechless. "You guys talked about Yu Qianqiu for half a day. Now Yu Qianqiu is standing in front of you, but none of you know him. I wonder who was it that said he was someone who drank with Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned and said, "What? Are you Immortal Masters also loose cultivators?" Immortal Master Zhao said loudly, "That's right. We 4 are loose cultivators in the cultivation world. Although we don't join any sects, we are still free and unfettered. The cultivation world is filled with loose cultivators. It can be said that there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers. There are countless experts. How can an ordinary person like you know about them?" Immortal Master Li reprimanded. Immortal Master Wu and Immortal Master Qiu looked at each other and felt that something was wrong. This kid was so rude in front of them, how could Shi Wenguang not care? Immortal Master Wu then asked in a probing tone, "Little brother, from what you said, do you know loose cultivators in the cultivation world?" "I do know a few." Yu Qianqiu added in his heart. "I've already killed all those I know." After thinking for a moment, he said, "Oh, that's right, I know someone called Hong Ming. His cultivation is not bad among loose cultivators, barely reaching the early stage of tribulation passing. He was the one who told me about how few rogue cultivators are presentable. I wonder if the four immortal masters know him? This was the only name he could think of. Back when the rogue cultivators pushed him to be the representative, the bearded man named Hong Ming was his staunch supporter. Unfortunately, he was accidentally killed by him. Hong Ming? The four immortal masters were speechless. Hong Ming may not be much in Yu Qianzhou's eyes, but he was one of the top figures among loose cultivators. He was not someone the four of them could come into contact with. Shi Wenguang glanced at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that he was still humbly asking for advice, he felt a chill in his heart. This guy was clearly trying to mess with them. Forget it, it's not his turn to speak. I might as well drink my own wine. The four of them looked at each other. Immortal Master Zhao asked with a guilty conscience, "Little brother, what is your relationship with Hong Ming?" He had already changed the way he addressed him from a yellow-haired kid to a little brother. Chapter 455. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "It's nothing much, we just played together for a while." He really did lead that group of loose cultivators to have fun for a while, so he wasn't lying. The four were speechless. Immortal Master Wu stood up and cupped his hands. "Hong Ming is a senior expert among us loose cultivators. Since young brother can play with him, you must not be a nobody. May I know young brother's great name?" Shi Wenguang couldn't help but sigh as he held his wine cup. He really wanted to tell them to stop asking, but he held back after some thought. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Shi Wenguang and walked away with his hands behind his back. He slowly walked to the space between the two horizontal tables and looked outside the tent. He said calmly, word by word, "I don't have any great name. I am merely Yu Qianzhou, the scum that immortal Master Zhao just mentioned, who was expelled from the sect twice." Crash. The wine cup that immortal Master Zhao had just picked up fell on the table and rolled to the ground. He didn't notice the wine spilling all over his body as he stared with wide eyes at the young man standing proudly in front of him with his hands behind his back. Silence. It was very quiet inside the tent, but the sounds of fighting and training could be heard very clearly outside. This wasn't the first time they had come to the pillar of the State General's tent, but this was the first time they could hear the sounds outside so clearly. However, they turned a deaf ear to them. Gulp, gulp. It was the sound of Shi Wenguang drinking wine. He finally knew how powerful Yu Qianzhou was in the cultivation world. He had only heard of it before, but now, these four usually arrogant immortal masters. Yu Qianzhou was right. They really couldn't show themselves in public. They didn't even know if the person was real or fake, but they were already scared to this extent. The four slowly stood up. The expressions on their faces were truly ever-changing. Yu Qianzhou looked around and said indifferently, "What? Does the four immortal masters think there's a problem?" Immortal Master Zhao swallowed with difficulty and laughed awkwardly. "Ah, little brother, are you joking? You are just an ordinary man, while Yu Qianzhou is an expert in the cultivation world. How can you two be lumped together?" His laughter sounded worse than crying, as if someone was strangling him. "Yu Qianzhou is an expert in the cultivation world?" Yu Qianzhou turned his head to stare at him and asked, "Immortal Master Zhao, isn't that wrong? I just heard you say that Yu Qianzhou is just a scum who was expelled from the sect twice. How did he become an expert now? Could it be that my hearing is bad? Did I hear wrongly?" These words struck at the heart. Immortal Master Zhao laughed and said, "Little brother really likes to joke. Great General, your cousin likes to joke around." The last sentence was directed at Shi Wenguang, but he saw that Shi Wenguang was engrossed in drinking, and his attitude was unclear. This time the four of them clearly felt that something was wrong. Every time they came, this great general was always respectful to them. How could such a situation occur? The heavy atmosphere caused by not knowing the truth made it hard for the four of them to breathe. A trace of ruthlessness flashed across Immortal Master Li's face, and he suddenly shouted, "This wine is boring, I don't want to drink any more. Great General, I'll take my leave." He cupped his hands and was about to leave, but just as he took a few steps away from the table, he heard someone behind him say indifferently, "You have guts. You dare to behave atrociously in front of me. If you have the guts, try walking out of this tent." The person who spoke was naturally Yu Qianzhou. "I can't walk anymore. I don't dare to walk anymore." Immortal Master Li's body was rooted to the ground, and he didn't even have the courage to turn around. Then he heard Yu Qianzhou say indifferently, "If you have the ability to walk out of this tent, I will spare your life. There is no joking in the army. You can try." His voice was very soft, but it was as if his words could decide their life and death. filled with unquestionable confidence. The four of them were scared witless. Even if a mortal pretended to be strong, it was impossible for him to act like this. Perhaps they really met that legendary person. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, the curtains of the inner tent moved, and 6 figures flashed out, standing in 4 different directions. 2 of them were guarding the entrance of the tent. There were a total of 10 people sent to protect Shi Wenguang. 2 were assigned to protect Shi Tian, and the other 2 were taking turns to take the restriction-breaking pill to increase their cultivation. These 6 guards, the 4 immortal masters had naturally seen them before, and thought that they were experts from the army. Now that they saw the commotion, they were dumbfounded. These 6 people were clearly cultivators, and based on their speed, their cultivation was much higher than theirs. The funny thing was, they actually dared to act like they were experts in front of the Pillar of States General for a long time. They didn't even know how much face they had lost. But then again, the 6 people's cultivation was much higher than theirs, and they really couldn't see through their cultivation. Facing a dead end, Immortal Master Li turned around, and the 4 of them stared at Shi Wenguang. Immortal Master Wu's face was ashen as he said, "Since the Grand General has so many experts protecting him, why waste time dealing with the 4 of us? Could it be that the army is so lonely and bored that you want to make fun of us? Isn't the Grand General a bit too much?" Shi Wenguang held his wine cup and paused for a moment, then shook his head with a bitter smile. He didn't know how to explain, not to mention that the right to decide was not in his hands. Immortal Master Wu turned around and gritted his teeth. "I don't care who you are, and I don't care if you are Yu Qianqiu. The 4 of us know that we can't escape from your palm, so what do you want to do with us? I'll say it again, as long as you can get out of this tent, I will spare his life." Yu Qianqiu glanced at him, then turned to look at Shi Wenguang and sneered, "The Grand General is so carefree, but aren't you being too concerned about some things?" The 4 immortal masters' faces were ashen. None of them had the guts to rush out. "Mister, please don't misunderstand." Shi Wenguang quickly stood up and cupped his hands in apology. "It's not that I want to pry into Mister's privacy, but the army has been on standby for a long period of time. The longer we wait, the more tired our morale will be. Asking for information about Mister is because I want to be prepared. I can't wait any longer. After all, time waits for no man. I'm worried that when the day comes, I won't be able to command the army." Yu Qianqiu frowned. Shi Wenguang's words were indeed a problem. With Shi Tian's experience and ability, he wouldn't be able to command the entire army. The 4 immortal masters also heard some clues and were aghast. This Yu Qianqiu's ambition was not small, he actually wanted to rebel. Wouldn't that mean that sooner or later he would have to fight with the supporting immortal island for the world? The matters of the cultivation world, the Grand General doesn't need to worry about it in the future. Just focus on your own matters. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly. "Mister's right." Shi Wenguang's voice was heavy. Because of this moment of carelessness, his entire family fell into the enemy's hands. Even if they wanted to resist, they didn't have the strength to do so. As for the problem that the Grand General is worried about, to me, it's not a problem at all. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. "If I extend your lifespan for another 10 years, I'm sure the Grand General won't have any misgivings, right?" "Mister, you mean?" Shi Wenguang was pleasantly surprised. He even suspected that he had heard wrongly. Yu Qianqiu didn't rush to reply. Instead, he turned to the 4 so-called immortal masters and asked, "Do any of you know about the 7 orifices exquisite pill?" The 4 people looked at each other, thinking about the name of the pill in their minds. Suddenly, Immortal Master Zhao revealed a look of realization. With the thought of redeeming himself, he said, "Mister, I remember now. I've heard people say that the 7 orifices exquisite pill is a miraculous pill. It is said that a mortal can extend their lifespan by 50 years, and a cultivator can extend their lifespan by 150 years. Mister, I wonder if I'm right? And? I didn't expect you to have some knowledge." Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded. "Mister is flattering me." Immortal Master Zhao smiled from ear to ear, his face full of flattery. However, after hearing what Yu Qianqiu said, he couldn't smile anymore. "If that's the case, then I'll give you a quick death," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, then made a kill without mercy gesture to the 6 guards. The guards were shocked, but they didn't even have the chance to scream before their heads were separated from their bodies. Their blood spurted high into the air, dyeing the ground red as they fell to the ground with a crash. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "In the future, if you see such swindlers again, for the sake of the great general's safety, kill without mercy." "Yes." The 6 people bowed and accepted the order. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, Pack up, all of you can leave for the time being. Without another word, the 6 people quickly carried the beheaded corpse out. They knew that their leader wanted to speak privately, so they closed the tent curtain, leaving only the 2 of them in the tent. Shi Wenguang was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He didn't expect Yu Qianzhou to be so cruel and merciless, taking people's lives so easily. He was used to seeing life and death, so he wasn't afraid of seeing dead people. It was the first time he saw the skills of his 6 guards, so he was shocked. He didn't even see what was going on before the heads of the 4 flying immortals were removed. Thinking about how there were always 6 powerful people around him who didn't share the same thoughts as him, he felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. To be honest, he was considered a famous general, so he didn't want to be controlled by others for a long time. He did have some disloyalty, and hoped to hook up with some experts in the cultivation world through the immortals. When the time was right, he wanted to get rid of the guards that Yu Qianzhou had sent to protect him and his family. But now he was really shocked by the reality in front of him. The other party didn't say anything and killed the people that he was going to use as a middleman. At the same time, he said it was for the sake of the great general's safety, and it completely cut off his little thoughts. How ruthless. This was something that both sides were aware of, so Yu Qianzhou wouldn't point it out. Since you've cut off your thoughts, you should be more obedient and stop thinking about unrelated things. He smiled faintly and took out a spirit pill. The inside of the tent was immediately filled with rippling blood-colored light, and it was abnormally mysterious and blurry. Shi Wenguang stared in surprise at the magical pill that was emitting a strange light. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "This is the 7 orifices exquisite pill that can extend a mortal's life by 50 years. In the cultivation world, it's something that can only be found by luck. Today, for the sake of the great general's imperial ambitions, Yu Qianzhou is willing to offer one to you, so that you won't have to worry about the future." Chapter 456. Although his words were pleasant, Shi Wenguang looked at the panacea before him in a daze. There was also a hint of desolation in his eyes. He was unwilling to take it for a long time. He was not excited that Yu Qianzhou was going to give him a rare panacea. Instead, he was thinking that Yu Qianzhou was going to give him a poison to control him. He had seen many similar things in his decades in the army. Yu Qianzhou saw through him and sneered. "General, you're underestimating me too much. Do you really think that you, the pillar of the kingdom, are indispensable? That I, Yu Qianzhou, can't do without you? If it wasn't for Shi Shaotian, why would I waste so much effort on your Shi family? I could have just knocked supporting Immortal Island off its pedestal. Would I be afraid that the Li dynasty wouldn't submit to me at that time? Why would I do all this?" Shi Wenguang was stunned by his words, but he suddenly became clear-headed. Thinking about it, if Shi Wenguang could push supporting Immortal Island off its position as the #1 sect, he would have the strength to lead the cultivation world. Why would he need to ask Shi Wenguang for help? It would be a simple matter for him to support someone to take over. However, there's no need to hesitate. This panacea is indeed a genuine exquisite pill of 7 orifices. If someone begs me to give it to them, I won't give it to them. A hint of impatience appeared on Yu Qianzhou's face. He said bluntly, "General, if you have anything to say, why don't you just say it? Let's not beat around the bush today." Shi Wenguang gritted his teeth and grabbed the panacea in his hand. He had made it clear that whether it was a poison or a panacea, he would eat it. "Forgive me for being blunt, but your actions just now clearly show that you want to firmly control my Shi family. You don't want to give us any chance to escape your control. Am I not supposed to be suspicious of you?" He raised the pill in his hand as he spoke. Yu Qianzhou paused for a moment before bursting into laughter. Shaking his head, he said, "I admit that I want to control your Shi family, but it's only temporary. It's not what you think it is. Once I'm done with what I want to do, you'll find that your Shi family's little sacrifice will bring you incalculable benefits." Shi Wenguang also regained the heroic spirit of a great general. He asked, "Mister, please speak frankly. It will also help to dispel the doubts in my heart and make me feel at ease." "All right. That way you can be mentally prepared. Let me see how bold you are, great General Shi." With a wave of his hand, Yu Qianzhou swept all the documents, papers, pens, tokens and the like onto the floor. Then he pulled out a box from thin air and placed it on the table. He opened the box, revealing a box full of clean jade archives. Yu Qianzhou pointed at the contents of the box, hinting for him to take a look. Shi Wenguang didn't know what he meant. He picked up a jade archive and looked at it over and over again. He couldn't figure out what it was, so he looked at Mr. Qianzhou doubtfully. Yu Qianqiu walked to his side and placed a palm on his shoulder. He said, "General, close your eyes. Let your consciousness follow the feeling I've transmitted to you." Shi Wenguang really did feel something strange coming from his hand. He immediately closed his eyes, and his consciousness was instantly guided by that strange thing. It flowed along his arm and into the jade archive in his palm. Although his eyes were still closed, he felt his vision brighten. A vast and detailed map appeared in front of him. Mountains, rivers, roads, city walls, the customs of every place, the population, military strength, and defense of every city were all displayed in front of him. Shi Wenguang was someone who had led troops into battle. Naturally, he knew what these things meant. While he was immersed in it, his gaze suddenly shifted to the icon of a magnificent palace. A few large words caught his attention: Drifting Cloud Country's Imperial Palace. He was instantly shocked, and his consciousness leapt out of the jade archive. He suddenly turned around and asked, "Is this the complete geographical map of Drifting Cloud Country?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. "General, you are indeed a general who has led troops for a long time. I don't need to explain it to you." Shi Wenguang gasped in shock. Such a detailed geographical map is unbelievable. I've never seen such a thing in my decades in the army. May I know who made it? Don't look at me with suspicion. I didn't do it. I took this from a foreign cultivator. It's a pity that I didn't know who that person was. I'm sure General can tell that the person who made this box of maps is after something big, Yu Qianqiu said. Naturally, he wouldn't say that he got this box of maps from the dead. All the jade archives in this box are here? Are all the country's maps in here? Shi Wenguang was even more shocked. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Not all of them. There are still 2 countries missing. Wuxia's map isn't among them. There's one more country, but I can't tell which one I missed. There are so many that I'm getting dizzy. But without a doubt, this missing country is the creator of these maps. Why are you so sure? Could it not be Wuxia's doing? Shi Wenguang asked in confusion. Do you really think that a single country is capable of making these maps? Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. Shi Wenguang hesitated. This is indeed difficult. Let's not talk about how long it would take. Other countries wouldn't allow a foreign country to investigate their country's terrain. Moreover, even the deployment of troops is marked in detail. It's very difficult. That's why I said that only cultivators have the ability to do this. When it comes to the cultivation world, you don't know it as well as I do. Yu Qianqiu touched the clean jade archives in the box with one hand and said slowly, "Why isn't there a map of Wuxia in here?" The reason is simple. Wuxia cultivators have always called themselves the orthodox cultivators of the world. They look down on foreign cultivators. Their xenophobia is very strong, to the point where they've closed themselves off from the outside world. If I don't interfere with the outside world shouldn't interfere with me either. Otherwise I won't be polite. It's almost impossible for foreign cultivators to spend a lot of time drawing maps in Wuxia without being discovered. This should be the reason why there isn't a map of Wuxia. Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that the map of Wuxia hasn't been completed, or that it wasn't placed in this box. However, the chances of that are slim. Based on what Mr. has said, the other country is the biggest suspect. Shi Wenguang put the jade archives in his hand back into the box with a solemn expression. It seems that someone has set his sights on the entire world. Hee. You can't hide your tail forever. We'll find out sooner or later, Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. How hard can it be to find out? Shi Wenguang asked in surprise. I have a list of the names of all the countries here. Mr. can just check and eliminate them. According to what Mr. has said, the remaining country must be the biggest suspect. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Is that so? Then give me a copy. He realized that he was always overthinking things. There were some things that were right in front of him that he couldn't see. Please wait a moment, mister. Shi Wenguang turned around and went into the inner tent. Not long after, he returned with a leather scroll and handed it to Yu Qianqiu. Regardless of size, the names of all 319 countries are all in here. Yu Qianqiu took the scroll, opened it, and nodded. He closed the box on the table and tossed it all into his storage pouch. Having him do such a meticulous job would give him a toothache. It was better to find someone more attentive. He then asked, "What are your thoughts after reading this, General?" Shi Wenguang's eyes narrowed. He slowly said, "I don't understand what Mr. means." You've guessed it even if you don't understand, right? Yu Qianqiu clasped his hands behind his back and paced back and forth in front of him, saying, "In the past, my thoughts were also limited to the Wuxia Empire. Ever since I saw this thing, It can be said that the clouds have been pushed aside to see the clear sky. Since we're going to play, let's play big. As he said this, he leaned in front of Shi Wenguang and asked, General, do you have the courage to lead an army of millions and conquer the entire world? The tent quieted down again. The roars of battle and training outside suddenly made one's blood boil. After a long silence, Shi Wenguang shook his head. Mister, you're flattering me. How could I dare to conquer the entire world? I can't take on this responsibility. General, you've spent half your life on the battlefield. You've earned your reputation on the back of a horse. Everyone in the Wuxia Empire knows about you. Yu Qianzhou patiently guided him. If you can make it bigger, let the entire world know about you. At that time, the general will be the world's #1 general. His name will be recorded in the annals of history, and he will be a role model for future generations. I'm afraid no one in the future generations will be able to surpass this glory. Shi Wenguang's lips tightened. His breathing gradually became heavier. His cheeks were slightly red. Clearly, his emotions were fluctuating and he was forcefully suppressing them. Yu Qianzhou smiled without saying a word. From his previous life, he knew that a general who disliked war and achievements would never become a famous general. Between countries, war was an eternal topic that could stand the test. War was also a drama that would never end. Peace was always an intermission. Everything else was bullshit. A powerful country would always be actively preparing for a war that could happen at any time. War belonged to generals who showed off their abilities. Those generals were also the most dazzling records in the annals of history. Yu Qianzhou believed that General Shi would be very interested. The world is big. There are countless brave generals who are good at war. Moreover, every country is guarded by people from the cultivation world. How could Shi Wenguang dare to conquer the world? Shi Wenguang swallowed with difficulty and rejected implicitly. He had long heard that Yu Qianzhou was a famous madman in the cultivation world. He dared to do anything. How could he be muddle-headed and agree to go against the entire world? Wouldn't that be nonsense? War was not child's play. If I can conquer the entire cultivation world and solve the worries of the general, do you dare? Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly. This guy had obviously taken out the most tempting thing and was constantly seducing her. Shi Wenguang smiled bitterly. Sir, why are you so sure that I have the ability to conquer the entire world? Because an unprecedented great man once wrote a poem to praise you. That's why I'm full of confidence in you, Yu Qianzhou said solemnly. Shi Wenguang was stunned. He asked, which great man wrote a poem to praise me? Why don't I know? What poem? That great man can only be admired in your heart. Don't talk about him. As for that poem, I can read it to you. Yu Qianzhou pressed his hand on the table and lightly tapped the rhythm. He recited, the mountains are high and the roads are deep. The great army gallops unhindered. Only I, General Shi, dare to attack. Chapter 457. The mountain is high, the road is long, the pit is deep, the army is running. Who dares to attack? Only I. Shi Wenguang smacked his lips and his eyes instantly became cold. The scenes of him leading the army to battle in the past appeared in front of his eyes, and it was so fitting to the poem he was tasting. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt the aura of a powerful army coming from his body. Together with his military uniform, he was fascinated by the war history of this great general. Shi Wenguang let out a deep breath and sighed. Sir, can you tell me who that great man is? Shi Wenguang is willing to pay a personal visit. General, don't mention this again, I won't tell you. Think about what I said. Yu Qianzhou said awkwardly. He thought to himself, even I can only be fascinated by Chairman Mao. Even if I tell you, you won't be able to meet him. Do I have a choice? Shi Wenguang looked at Yu Qianzhou and smiled bitterly. Yes, of course you have a choice. Yu Qianzhou said obediently, I never force people to do things they don't like. Shi Wenguang shook his head slightly. You even told me about this, it's the same as cutting off all my escape routes. If I don't agree with your ruthless killing intent, it's impossible for you to let me go. With your ability in the cultivation world, isn't it good to be a free and unfettered immortal? Why are you so interested in worldly matters? Shi Wenguang asked. Yu Qianzhou was silent for a long time about this question. He slowly paced back and forth in the tent. While walking he said, one day I had a dream. It was a very real dream. In the dream I died helplessly. I didn't even have the slightest chance to resist. That kind of desolate and helpless state of mind is not something that outsiders can understand. After I woke up, I was worried that this kind of thing would repeat to me, so I made up my mind, no matter in heaven or earth, I don't want anyone to force me to die. If a person obstructs me, I will kill a god. If a god obstructs me, I will kill a god. I don't want to have any shackles anymore, I want to live a truly free and unfettered life. Mr. is indeed an extraordinary person. You've awakened from your dream and made up your mind. Shi Wenguang was speechless. A madman really was a madman. Just because of a dream, he actually wanted to mobilize troops to conquer the world. After a pause, he asked with some doubts, if you can stand out in the cultivation world, what you are worried about will not happen. How can the secular people force you? Yu Qianqiu stopped in his tracks. He suddenly turned around and said word by word, I still have my family in the secular world. I won't allow anyone in this world to force my family to die. No one. The determination in his words could not be doubted. When Shi Wenguang heard this, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Startled, he said perfunctorily, Mr. really values friendship and righteousness. General Shi, I'm not joking with you. Yu Qianqiu walked in front of him and said indifferently, I can do my best to help you conquer the world, but the price your Shi clan has to pay is to ensure my Yu clan's prosperity and safety for 10 lifetimes. After that, we don't owe each other anything. This is my goal. You don't need to have any doubts. As he said this, he pointed to the spirit pill in his hand and said, the spirit pill in your hand is a treasure that everyone in the cultivation world dreams of. It is even more impossible for mortals to have the chance to obtain it. I will use this spirit pill to extend your life by at least 50 years in exchange for your Shi clan's promise to ensure my Yu clan's prosperity and safety for 10 lifetimes. This request is not too much, is it? Shi Wenguang quickly calculated in his heart. 1 world in exchange for 10 lifetimes of prosperity and safety for his Yu clan. This deal was definitely worth it. His eyes immediately lit up. Mister, are you serious? Does General think that we are talking about a child's game? Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly. Since that is the case, do you dare to make an oath with me? Shi Wenguang raised a large, calloused palm. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. It seemed that this guy also knew that cultivators could not casually make oaths. He actually wanted to use this to restrain himself. He nodded and said, why not? However, I have to say something unpleasant first. Before you seize the world, you must listen to my arrangements. Shi Wenguang said without hesitation, of course. Although I have millions of lions under me, I am only content with a small area. It is difficult for me to take care of the whole situation. Mr., on the other hand, must have a plan in mind. You will definitely make proper arrangements. Shi Wenguang absolutely believes in Mr.'s ability. That is great. Only the general understands me. Yu Qianqiu waved his palm and slapped his palm. Their 10 fingers intersected and clasped together. Shi Wenguang said in a deep voice, if Mr. can help my Shi clan control the world's divine weapon, my Shi clan will ensure the Yu clan's prosperity and safety for 10 lifetimes. If I go against this oath, my Shi clan will not have a good ending. I, Yu Qianqiu, will help the Shi clan to ascend to the top of the world in exchange for 10 lifetimes of prosperity and safety for the Yu clan's descendants. If I go against this oath, I will be punished by the heavens. Yu Qianqiu said with a faint smile, is General at ease now? After the two of them let go of each other, Shi Wenguang stuffed the spirit pill in his other hand into his mouth and swallowed it without saying a word. He used his actions to show that he no longer had any doubts. Then he laughed out loud and said, servants, serve wine and dishes. Yu Qianqiu wanted to help him completely stimulate the medicinal effects of the spirit pill, but he was interrupted. He thought about it and gave up on this idea. He muttered to himself, going too far is as bad as falling short. After waiting for a while, there was no response from outside. The two of them looked at each other and were stunned. They walked to the door and lifted the curtain together. They saw that everyone within 30 meters outside had retreated completely. Shi Wenguang smiled bitterly and said, Mr. Subordinates are indeed well trained. As soon as he said this, Yu Qianqiu immediately understood. His subordinates knew that he wanted to say something private and was afraid that it would be heard by outsiders. Even the guards in the vicinity had been cleared away. How efficient. He smiled awkwardly and said, it's good that there's no one around. I happen to have something that I need General's help with. The two of them looked outside and put down the curtain at the same time. They walked back side by side and the misunderstanding from before was completely gone. Shi Wenguang asked, what do you need me to do, mister? I heard that General has many experts who are good at disguising themselves. I have a group of people who want to use this technique to change their appearance, Yu Qianqiu said. Shi Wenguang was surprised and said, with Mr. Supernatural power, isn't it easy to change your appearance? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Does General really think that people in the cultivation world are living gods who can change their appearance at any time?" That's easy. I don't dare to guarantee other things, but when it comes to disguising, it's not a problem at all. I've been fighting here for many years, and in order to spy on the enemy, disguising is the most common method." Shi Wenguang smiled and asked, "I wonder if Mr. wants to directly put on makeup or use a human skin mask to change your appearance." "You have human skin masks here?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. He had never come into contact with such a thing, and he felt that it was a little strange. When two armies fight, death is a common occurrence. Naturally, there's no lack of human skin, Shi Wenguang said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu gulped and asked, "Which one is more convenient to use?" Although he wasn't afraid, he subconsciously rejected it. Who would like to stick dead people's skin on their face? Of course it's convenient to use a human skin mask. When you don't want to use it, you can just take it off and stick it on again. It's not like makeup. Once you take it off and want to change your appearance again, if you don't know how to do it yourself, you'll have to bring along people who know how to change their appearance, and it's also time-consuming, Shi Wenguang explained. Damn it. Looks like I really have to use that disgusting thing. Yu Qianqiu coughed and said, "Then I'll have to trouble General to prepare a few reliable disguising experts for me. Make sure to keep it a secret and don't let the news leak." The next day, a large tent was suddenly erected in the Western military camp. There were more than 60 people sitting cross-legged inside. They were the 30 Special Forces members led by Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun respectively. More than 10 soldiers who were good at disguising were meticulously taking their measurements. For something like a human skin mask, if the size was not suitable, then it would be a big problem. Anyone could tell at a glance that it was a disguise. Ever since Zhang Ping arrived, he hadn't said a word. Yu Qianqiu didn't care about him. He knew that he was reminiscing about the past, so he pulled an old soldier aside and kept asking questions. "Master, you have to help me make it look better. The nose needs to be like this and a little higher. Yes, just like this." After constant modification, Yu Qianqiu picked up a picture, shook his head and praised, "Indeed a handsome and elegant man. Why do I feel that he looks a little familiar?" Shi Wenguang was really speechless. The human skin mask was originally used to hide one's original appearance. It was fine as long as it didn't reveal anything. Why would there be so many requirements? Under normal circumstances, it was better to be as low-key as possible. Who would deliberately make themselves so conspicuous? This guy was really different. Who does he look like? Yu Qianqiu held the picture and muttered. Suddenly, his expression froze and he screamed, "Damn it! It's that old bastard Nongzhu." It turned out that he had been so focused on making himself more handsome that he had unknowingly chosen the most handsome guy he had ever seen. He had accidentally stolen Nongzhu's innate copyright. Although he only looked 70 to 80% like Nongzhu, he was already handsome enough. "Why don't we make some changes and make it a little uglier?" the old soldier asked in an inquiring tone. "There's no need to make it ugly. Let's just make do with it. It'll be too troublesome to change it. Just make a few more of it according to this style." Yu Qianqiu shoved the picture to the old soldier. The old soldier accepted the order verbally, but in his heart, he was cursing, "So you know how to be afraid of trouble. I thought you were going to change it by a few days." The sizes of Hong Qi and the other two's masks had already been prepared. All they had to do was wait for the real thing to be made. Yu Qianqiu looked at the 3 people in front of him. He took out 2 jade archives and handed one to Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun, saying, "Inside are some people who can help you during critical moments. Remember, rely on yourself for everything. Don't trouble others unless it's absolutely necessary." Yes. The 2 gladly accepted the order. Yu Qianqiu turned to Zhang Peng and said, "You haven't come into contact with the cultivation world, and you don't have much experience either. Just follow me." Zhang Peng bowed and accepted the order. Yu Qianqiu nodded at the 3 of them, indicating for them to wait. He then pulled Shi Wenguang along and the 2 of them walked out of the tent while talking. Chapter 458. During this period of time, Yu Qianqiu, who had caused a storm in the Chinese cultivation world, had disappeared. He had disappeared completely. He had left without a trace. Ever since he left the Wuxia Cultivation Alliance, the Daoyuo sect decided to fight him to the death because they couldn't allow such an enemy to grow. It was too dangerous. Therefore they sent many people to search openly and secretly, but they couldn't find a trace of him. Someone commented, "He came and left quietly." He didn't take anything with him and only left a bunch of enemies. No matter what others said, in a room in the myriad fragrance garden on Fuxian Island, Yu Qianqiu was sleeping soundly while hugging a soft and tender body. Inside the brocade quilt, half of Hibiscus's delicate body was exposed. She opened her eyes wide and looked at his sleeping posture. Suddenly, she giggled and stretched out her two slender fingers to pinch his nose. She didn't let him breathe because the noise coming from that place was very loud. Yu Qianqiu, who had his nose pinched, didn't even open his eyes. He made a cat's voice through his nose and said, "Serious warning, if you don't let me breathe through my nose, I will be very angry. Once I get angry, the consequences will be very serious. Are you going to let go?" "No, I definitely won't let go." Hibiscus giggled. However, his hand had already touched a certain sensitive part of her body. It made her tremble and she couldn't laugh anymore. "Last warning, if you don't let go, you will face severe punishment. Are you going to let go?" Yu Qianqiu said righteously. Hibiscus quickly retracted her hand and hid under the quilt. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and said with a naughty smile, "I forgot to tell you, if you dare to bully my people in bed, even if you let go, I won't let you go. Little vixen, hand over your life." With that said, he suddenly buried himself under the quilt. Suddenly there was a messy sound coming from the bed. It seemed like Hibiscus was crying for help in a very coquettish manner. After a long time, the two of them had enough fun. Both of them weakly hugged each other and poked their heads out. Yu Qianqiu kept asking her about Fuxian Island. Hearing Furong's answers, he suddenly pushed her away and looked at her seriously. "Come with me, I'll take you out of here." The room instantly became silent. Furong widened her eyes and asked weakly, "Are you going to take me away from Fuxian Island?" She seemed to be lacking in confidence. Her delicate body was trembling uncontrollably, which meant that she was a little nervous about leaving supporting Immortal Island. "Right, I will bring you out of Fuxian Island. It is time for you to go out and have a walk. This broken island shouldn't trap you for the rest of your life." Yu Qianqiu looked at her with a pitiful expression. He caressed her hair to console her. "I'm afraid that if I go out, I won't be able to find the way back." As Hibiscus spoke, she grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's arm tightly. It was as though she was grabbing onto her last life-saving straw. Her eyes were filled with fear and unease. "How can that be? Don't you still have me?" Yu Qianqiu tried his best to smile very gently, hoping to give her a smile that would make her feel at ease. "I heard from the female senior in the garden that there is a kind of man in this world that is like the wind. When he comes suddenly, and when he leaves immediately. He won't stay. Women will never be able to accompany him. You came very suddenly and left just like that. Could you be that man who is like the wind?" The more Hibiscus spoke, the softer her voice became. She didn't dare to look at him directly. She was afraid that he would be unhappy because of what she said. "Oh, there is such a flashy saying? Damn, which slut said that?" Yu Qianqiu said in astonishment. He looked at Hibiscus, who seemed to have done something wrong. He placed his hand on her smooth and soft waist and shook it. "Look at me." Hibiscus looked at him in confusion. She saw Yu Qianqiu stretch out a palm and solemnly say, "I, Yu Qianqiu, swear to the heavens that as long as Hibiscus doesn't despise me, don't hate me, I, Yu Qianqiu, will never abandon her in this lifetime. I will never let her get lost." After swearing, Hibiscus's eyes instantly brightened. They were filled with indescribable joy. She suddenly hugged him fiercely like an octopus. She nodded repeatedly and said, "I will never despise you, never hate you. I'll go with you." "Cough cough, smelly woman, you're strangling me to death. Quickly let go." "I'm willing. I'll strangle you to death. I'll strangle you, smelly man." Just as Hibiscus's coquettish words finished, a slap landed on her butt. Hibiscus immediately retaliated strongly. The bed became a mess again. The blankets couldn't cover her anymore. TSK. That was like the radiance of spring. All right. Stop fighting. I admit defeat." After a long time, Yu Qianqiu grabbed Hibiscus's hands and said with a bitter smile. Not to mention that this seemingly frail woman had a peerless weapon in her possession. This was the first time he discovered that she actually had such exuberant energy. She could torment someone to death. Hibiscus didn't say anything else and leaned over again. Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Hibiscus, we can't always laze around in bed. If you want to go with me, shouldn't you tell your father first?" Speaking of this, Hibiscus's expression became hesitant again. She said embarrassedly, "He keeps saying that you're a little heartless. What if he doesn't let me go with you?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. His expression immediately softened. That was his future father-in-law. If he scolded him, so be it. He awkwardly smiled and said, "You go and tell him. With me here he won't stop you. Go quickly, we're in a hurry." Hibiscus was very confident in him. She nodded and immediately got out of the quilt to put on her clothes. Yu Qianqiu leaned sideways with his head propped up to admire. With such a graceful beauty accompanying him, this life was not in vain. After watching Hibiscus go out, he was suddenly shocked and quickly got up to put on his clothes. Ferdinand knew that he was going to take his daughter away, so he would definitely come to question him. He couldn't let others see him lying naked on his daughter's bed. Ferdinand was as angry as ever. In fact, he knew that Yu Qianqiu came. He was just about to go to the backyard to see his daughter, who knew that the door was closed and there were some muffled sounds inside. How could he not know who came? The reason why Ferdinand was angry was that he suspected that this kid had ulterior motives. Otherwise, how could he do that with his daughter every time he came? It was too outrageous. He was simply unscrupulous and condescending. This brat's notorious behavior had already forced him to clear out the entire backyard as his daughter's territory. Even he himself had to find someone else to temporarily stay with, let alone the others. What was the use of being angry? Who asked his precious daughter to like him? Who asked him to owe his daughter too much? He really didn't dare to make her a little unhappy. Ferdinand sighed helplessly. This brat, Yu Qianqiu, had taken away the most precious thing in his life. His daughter's face was still full of lust and happiness. What else could he say? "Father, Yu Qianqiu asked you to go over," Hibiscus said shyly. She wanted to say that she wanted to go with Yu Qianqiu, but she didn't dare to say it when the words were on the tip of her tongue. She simply threw the trouble to Yu Qianqiu. If this sentence was heard by Yu Qianqiu would be so grateful that he would cry bitterly and shout, "Sister, how can I be a man if you do this?" Sure enough, when Ferdinand heard this, he was so angry that smoke came out of his 7 orifices. His body trembled and his eyes were wide open. That bastard had just done that with my daughter. Now he actually sent my daughter over and asked me to go over to see him. This was simply unreasonable. Ferdinand was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Seeing that his hair and beard were trembling, his eyes were red, and his body was trembling, Hibiscus asked doubtfully, "Father, what's wrong with you?" The word "father" was like a cooling agent that immediately made Ferdinand feel much better. Hibiscus usually didn't call him father. She would only call him like this when it was related to Yu Qianqiu. But how could this anger be so easily dispelled? Ferdinand slammed the table with a bang. Like a tiger that was about to eat people, he stood up and shouted angrily, "Okay, I'll go and see this great god." Yu Qianqiu was doing chest expansion exercises in the small garden in the backyard. He was so refreshed. In the blink of an eye, my future father-in-law is here. When Yu Qianqiu just put on a smiling face and was ready to welcome him, he suddenly found that something was wrong. Why is Ferdinand's face as black as Lord Bao's? Is he poisoned? Hibiscus's expression was also a little nervous. Countless thoughts turned in an instant, but she didn't expect Hibiscus's words to spoil everything. But she still smiled and bowed, "Senior Fei. You're good, Yu Qianqiu." Ferdinand's hand trembled. He pointed his finger and shouted, I'll kill you." Then he slammed his palm on Yu Qianqiu's head. Damn. Yu Qianqiu quickly dodged. Bang! A pit had already appeared on the ground. Ah! Hibiscus screamed and flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side to block. Ferdinand didn't say anything and didn't care about his daughter. He was so angry that his eyes turned red. He raised his palm and slammed it toward the two people. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly hugged Hibiscus and dodged together. The garden was suddenly in a mess. It was really a pit with one palm. "Old thing, if you don't stop, don't blame me for being rude." Yu Qianqiu hugged Hibiscus and dodged here and there. He was in a mess. With his current cultivation, he didn't need to be afraid of Ferdinand at all. However, it also depended on who he was dealing with. Good. I want to see how you are going to be rude." Ferdinand was so angry that he laughed. He moved his finger and a cold light flew out of the storage bag. A flying sword stood in the air. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and quickly turned Hibiscus behind him to protect her. He said in a deep voice, "Ferdinand, are you serious? Did you take the wrong medicine? What did I do to make you so angry? Even if I want to take Hibiscus away, you don't need to be so angry. You don't even care about your daughter's life? You're an unreasonable, ruthless, and shameless person. I swear. Ferdinand was stunned on the spot. He was mute for a long time before he said in shock, "What did you say? You want to take Hibiscus away?" Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and looked back at Hibiscus, who was staring at her father. He turned his head and asked suspiciously, "Didn't Hibiscus tell you just now?" Chapter 459. Ferdinand looked at his daughter and was a little confused. "Since I didn't tell you, why are you so angry?" Yu Qianqiu was also a little confused and thought, "Don't tell me you only know about me and your daughter today. You created such a quiet environment to have an affair." Unable to figure it out, he turned back and asked again, "Ferong, what did you say to your father?" Ferong was bashful. "Didn't you ask me to come to see you?" Ferdinand asked, and the flying sword had been taken back. "Oh, what are you talking about? If I want to see you, I should go to see you. How can I ask you to come over?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned and thought, "I am not that thick-skinned. I just did it with your daughter and then immediately asked you to come to see me. Isn't this insulting?" The two men's eyes returned to Ferong again. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "Didn't you tell your father about this?" "I called my father. You should tell him." Ferong pulled his sleeve. The two men immediately looked at each other and understood a little. It turned out that this girl's inappropriate words almost caused the father-in-law and son-in-law to fight desperately, but they still didn't know what was going on. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and held Ferong's hand awkwardly. He said to Ferdinand, "Senior Ferdinand, let's forget about this. Let's get back to business." Ferdinand also coughed twice and threw the flying sword into the storage bag. He said with a somewhat unnatural expression, "Well, let's talk business." He thought, "I have misunderstood this kid, but it doesn't matter. I have given you my daughter. It doesn't matter if I misunderstand you. I came this time to take Ferong away. I hope Senior Ferdinand can help me," Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. Ferdinand's expression also became solemn. He frowned deeply and said, "It's not that I don't want you to take Ferong away, but do you know your current situation? There is no possibility of mediation between you and Daluo sect now. It has reached the point where you can't coexist with each other. Do you think it's safe to take Ferong with you?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Daluo sect? Let them jump around for now. Sooner or later, I will remove their names from the cultivation world. You don't have to worry about this. If I can't guarantee Ferong's safety, I won't take her away." Remove the Daluo sect from the cultivation world? Ferdinand was speechless. Even Fuxian Island did not dare to say such words. He shook his head and sighed, "Young and frivolous. Do you really think that a sect that has stood in the cultivation world for thousands of years is really that simple? The sect's roots run deep, and the things inside are definitely not things that outsiders can easily understand. Those old monsters who became famous many years ago, although they no longer appear, who dares to say that they are already dead? No matter how deep the roots are, I will still uproot them." Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and smiled, "Senior Fei, don't worry. There won't be any danger for Ferong to follow me. I'm prepared to bring her to travel around and let her gain some experience. Staying on Fuxian Island for the rest of her life isn't a solution." As he spoke, he gently held Ferong in his arms with a face full of pity. Ferong nodded at her father seriously, her eyes begging for her father's consent. Ferdinand's heart instantly softened. He shook his head and sighed. "Fine, fine. As long as you treat my daughter well, I don't care about anything else. But I'll say this first. If you let anything happen to Ferong, I'll make you pay even if I have to sacrifice this old life of mine." "Senior Fei, I won't say anything unnecessary. I'll take your daughter away today and I'll give you a promise," Yu Qianqiu said with a solemn expression. "I'll protect Ferong with all my heart for the rest of her life. I won't bully her and no one else can bully her either. Whoever dares to touch her will have to die." Ferong, who was in his arms, immediately let out a whimper and hugged his waist tightly. "Good, good, good." Ferdinand nodded repeatedly and asked with great relief, "Where are you going to take Ferong to travel? If I have time, I'll go see you guys." Yu Qianqiu looked at Ferong lovingly and said, "I'll take her to travel around the countries and let her see the customs of the foreign lands. I hope Senior Fei can keep this a secret for me." Oh, what did you say?" Ferdinand laughed halfway and suddenly choked on his throat. He said in exasperation, "Going to a foreign country? Are you crazy? You killed a few foreign cultivators in the 100 Flowers Valley, and the Yen father and son have enmity with you. You're courting death by going there." "Senior Fei," Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly and then said with a smile, "Please leave Ferong to me with peace of mind." He lowered his head and asked Ferong, "Are you afraid?" Ferong shook her head. Her eyes flickered as she looked at Ferdinand, still looking pitiful and pleading. Ferdinand opened his mouth for a while and finally stomped his feet heavily. "So, you guys, what do you want me to say?" "Farong, let's say goodbye to your father." Yu Qianqiu pulled Farong away and the two of them faced Ferdinand side by side and bowed deeply. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "Senior Fei, please take care of yourself. I'll bring Farong back to see you in the future." "You guys." Ferdinand was speechless looking at the two of them. Yu Qianqiu pulled Farong into his arms again and said with a light smile, "Close your eyes. Don't open them until I say something." Farong heavily nodded her head and subconsciously held him tightly. She also closed her eyes tightly. She knew that Yu Qianqiu was about to use that shadowless and traceless magic technique. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and could not help but kiss her smooth forehead gently. Then the two of them suddenly disappeared on the spot. Ferdinand's eyes widened as he realized something very strange. He looked around and released his divine sense to search around, but there was no sign of anyone. Even an expert at the final stage of the tribulation stage could not teleport with a person. Ferdinand stood in the garden for a long time. Did his daughter just leave him like this? Then he let out a sigh of relief. Since Yu Qianqiu had such remarkable power, it should not be a problem for him to protect himself with Farong when he encountered danger. No wonder he was so confident. No wonder old ancestor Qingnu could not catch him back then. Although Farong was the daughter of the principal elder of Wanfen Garden, she rarely met anyone in the entire Fuxian Island. Her disappearance would probably not be noticed or cared by anyone in the entire Fuxian Island. Of course, Ferdinand, who was in a daze at the moment, was full of disappointment as if someone had cut out a piece of flesh from his heart. Yu Qianqiu teleported to a secret place in Utopia with Hibiscus. After settling down for a while, they disappeared again. When they reappeared, they were already in an empty military camp, and there were endless sounds of large-scale people training and killing outside. Yu Qianqiu looked at Farong, who was hugging him tightly in his arms, and a smirk appeared on his face. He broke free from her and stood at the side. Farong's face was immediately filled with uneasiness. She stood at the same place and did not dare to move. Her hands were touching everywhere, but her eyes were closed tightly. It was obvious that she listened to Yu Qianqiu's instructions and did not dare to open her eyes out of fear. Yu Qianqiu did not dare to scare her, so he quickly said, "All right, open your eyes." The first thing Farong did when she opened her eyes was not to look at the surrounding environment, but to quickly walk over and grab Yu Qianqiu's arm. Then she widened her eyes and looked around. She asked with some uneasiness, "Where are we?" "Don't be afraid. This is a secular military camp. Let's go. I'll take you out to take a look." Yu Qianqiu held her hand and pulled her out of the tent. The sun was shining brightly outside, but dust was flying everywhere. The army was training non-stop. Bright armor, long spears and steeds galloped forward. It was a grand and magnificent sight. Farong looked at all of this curiously. This was something she had never seen before. Yu Qianqiu was like a little pet as he pulled her around. She turned her head around as if she could never get enough of seeing. A woman who had not been tainted by the secular world was like a fairy that had descended from the heavens in this military camp. She was so outstanding. In the cultivation world, any woman with a bit of aptitude would not have bad looks, let alone Farong, who was extremely beautiful. A group of men could not help but want to take a few more glances. However, the state pillar general was strict with his troops, and no one dared to be impudent during training. After walking one round, Yu Qianqiu brought Farong to the central tent. Shi Wenguang and his son, who were discussing military matters, were stunned when they saw Farong. They secretly praised in their hearts, "What a beautiful and delicate woman." Shi Wenguang asked with some doubt, "This young lady is?" "My woman." Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly, then turned to Shi Tian and said, "I'll have to trouble young general to find the old master who helped me change my appearance. I'll trouble him again. Mr. is too polite, I'll go right away." Shi Tian cupped his fists towards Farong and said, "Greetings, madam." Farong was a little scared and shrank back. Yu Qianqiu patted her hand and said, "Don't be afraid, they are all my friends." He then turned to Shi Tian and apologized, "Young general, please don't be offended. She has never been in the secular world before and is afraid to meet strangers." "It's fine." Shi Tian awkwardly cupped his fists and left. Shi Wenguang looked at Farong for a while and saw that her eyes were filled with innocence. Clearly it was as Yu Qianqiu said, she had never seen the world before, so he didn't bother to be polite. He immediately raised his hand and said, "Mr. and Madam, please sit." Yu Qianqiu led Farong to sit on the side and asked, How are the preparations? Shi Wenguang walked down and sat opposite the two of them. He replied, Mr. Don't worry, everything has been arranged. Once Mr. goes there, there will naturally be someone to receive you. Good. Yu Qianqiu nodded. At present, because of the war between the cultivation world and the cultivation world of China, the defense of the borders was quite tight. It was estimated that the cultivation world on both sides had sent cultivation world experts to guard. It would not be easy to fly over without being discovered. Because they were bringing Furong along for safety's sake, Shi Wenguang arranged for a caravan to bring some silver balls over. When the time came, they would naturally be safe. While they were talking, Shi Tian had already brought the old soldier over. Yu Qianqiu immediately arranged for him to measure Furong's face. Although Furong didn't know what to do, she naturally wouldn't object to Yu Qianqiu's arrangement. After the measurements were done, Yu Qianqiu and the old soldier discussed for a long time and finally decided on an inconspicuous design for Furong. Shi Wenguang was speechless. This guy made himself so conspicuous, but he made his woman, cough cough. However, after thinking about it, it was understandable. At this time, if he made a woman too conspicuous, it would definitely attract trouble. Chapter 460. The bright moon hung in the sky, the stars dotted the sky, the world was vast and deep. Not far from the military camp, at the foot of a barren hillside, Yu Qianqiu looked at the 60 people lined up neatly in front of him. He stared for a long time, thinking about how many of these people would survive in the end. However, where there is struggle, there is sacrifice. This is inevitable. Hibiscus hid behind Yu Qianqiu and quietly poked half of her head out, curiously sizing up this group of people. From the fact that this group of people flew close to the ground at high speed without any help, she could tell that they were all experts at the early stage of the crossing calamity realm. What made her most curious was that this group of experts seemed to be very respectful to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu let go of Hibiscus's hand, walked in front of Gu Qingyun and said with a smile, I have always admired you, so I gave you a chance. I hope I did not misjudge you. Gu Qingyun slightly bowed, did not say anything. Yu Qianqiu punched his chest, sighed and said, Work hard, fight hard. One day you will realize that the opportunity one gave you is much better than what Fuxian Island gave you. With that said, he waved his hand at everyone and said, Let's go. He turned around and walked back, pulling Hibiscus up the hillside. Hong Qi shouted from behind, Master. He ran over, but it was unknown what he wanted to say. Yu Qianqiu said without turning his head, I have said what I need to say to you. You are not a child anymore, go on your own. Zhang Ping moved in a flash to block in the middle, stretched out his hand to stop them and said, Senior brother, please go back. Although he was older than Hong Qi, he became his disciple later, so he still had to call him senior brother. Hong Qi helplessly stopped. He turned around and exchanged a glance with Gu Qingyun before nodding. Both of them waved their hands and lightly shouted, Let's go. The group of people split into two groups and flew in two different directions. Since the border area was guarded by people from the cultivation world, they did not dare to fly too high. On the hillside under the moonlight, the three of them stopped and watched. After everyone disappeared into the night, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, Let's go back and rest for the night. We'll set off tomorrow. Although he said he was resting, Yu Qianqiu couldn't fall asleep no matter what. Shi Wenguang gave them a separate place to rest and surrounded it with a fence. Yu Qianqiu was practicing the animal show in the fence as if he was possessed. If he didn't rest, Furong wouldn't be able to. She moved a small military stool and sat under the tent. She supported her chin with her hands and watched curiously. Zhang Peng had been standing guard outside the tent all along, taking the initiative to guard his master. At this moment he was silently watching his master's every move. In his memory, his master had been able to dissolve his attack with a single finger. Until now he had never seen a second person who could do that, and he had always admired him endlessly. Therefore he believed that what his master was practicing now was definitely not something simple, so he watched very carefully. The moonlight shone down on Yu Qianqiu. After practicing for a while inside the fence, he felt the inexplicable feeling of depression in his heart dissipate. He suddenly felt as if there was nothing between heaven and earth. His heart was as calm as still water, and only the scenes of the animal show kept flashing through his mind. The movements he practiced became smoother and smoother. Gradually, his movements became as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water, and a sense of beauty slowly appeared in his movements. This was the first time he found such a comfortable pleasure from practicing the animal show. When he spread his arms, it was as if he was a goshawk patrolling the blue dome of heaven, looking for prey. When he bent his fingers, it was as if he was a mantis that only needed to catch a cicada. That feeling was really wonderful. Farong, who was sitting on the stool, felt that his movements were getting better and better. On the other hand, Zhang Peng's expression gradually became serious. There was a thoughtful look in his eyes, indicating that he seemed to have noticed something. Gradually, there was a trace of surprise in his eyes, and he watched attentively without blinking, as if he was afraid of missing any details. Only when the first rays of dawn appeared, and the neighing of the war horses became chaotic, did Yu Qianzhou wake up from his own world. He only felt that the meridians in his body were incomparably comfortable, and his whole body was also refreshed. After returning to the tent, he took off his sweaty clothes and activated the water art. A clear stream enveloped him and washed him. Dayang Empire's territory was only a few tenths of the size of the Wuxia Empire, but it was one of the countries that had been at war with the Wuxia Empire for a long time. The capital of the empire was called Dayang City. Although it couldn't compare to the capital of Wuxia, it was still very prosperous. After all, it was still the capital of a country. On the bustling main street of the imperial capital, there was an inn called Welcome Inn. In the whole of Dayang City, it couldn't be considered a big inn. Fortunately, the price was fair and business was booming. Today, after several groups of guests who wanted to stay in the inn entered, they all left in disappointment. There was no other reason, but the reason was that someone had booked the entire inn. The inn's backyard was clean and tidy, and it was empty for a group of guests who had suddenly arrived. This group of guests was none other than Yu Qianzhou and his two companions. This inn looked ordinary, but its background was not simple. It was a place that Shi Wenguang had planted here for a long time. The inn's owner was surnamed Sang, and he had long received news from Shi Wenguang. However, he didn't expect that just as he received the news and prepared, the people would arrive without a sound. It was simply unimaginable. However, he knew that there were some things that he shouldn't ask about. He only needed to cooperate with the people who had arrived. After Yu Qianzhou and his companions put on the human skin masks, their appearances had completely changed. Yu Qianzhou himself had long since become a handsome and dashing young master. Shi Wenguang didn't know where in the military camp he had found a folding fan for Yu Qianzhou. Farong, on the other hand, was in a worse state. She was thin to begin with, and her pale complexion made it seem as if she had been ill for a long time. Her appearance was also sloppy and ordinary, completely concealing her beauty. At this moment, in a room in the backyard, a box filled with jade archives was placed on a large table. Yu Qianzhou fanned himself with a folding fan, looking very narcissistic. He took out a jade archive, imbued it with his divine sense, and then reported the name of a country. Farong, who was sprawled in front of the table, took a pen and ticked off the corresponding country's name on the leather scroll. Baiwan Nation. After reporting this name, Yu Qianzhou was slightly taken aback. He recalled that Ziyi had mentioned this country before. It seemed that when Lan Feng, the second strongest expert in the world, resided in this country. He couldn't help but take a closer look. Only then did he realize that when Lan Feng was actually a member of the royal family. The royal family of Baiwan Nation was surnamed Wen. Thus, he skimmed through the general situation of the Wen royal family and silently committed it to memory. When he reported Dian Nation, he looked through it again. After all, he was now in the imperial city of Dian Nation, so he had to understand a little bit more. Farong had already found the box. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou was reading attentively, she didn't disturb him. She bit the tip of her pen and waited quietly. The royal family of Dian Nation is surnamed Zhao. Yu Qianzhou muttered. He put down the scroll in his hand and took out another jade archive to report. After spending the entire morning, the two of them finally went through all the jade archives. At the same time, Yu Qianzhou's mind was filled with many things. After putting the jade archives away, Yu Qianzhou asked, "See if there are any countries that haven't been ticked off?" Farong eagerly hugged the cowhide scroll and easily found it. She pointed to the two countries at the top of the scroll and said, "The Wuxia Empire and the Tuan Empire." Yu Qianzhou leaned over to take a look. The Wuxia Empire was first and the Tuan Empire was second. This list of countries was arranged according to the size of their territories. In other words, the Tuan Empire was the country with the largest territory among all the foreign countries. Yu Qianzhou tapped his finger on the Tuan Empire's name. He chuckled coldly and said, "I've been looking for a long time. So it's you." Farong turned to look at him. She didn't know why he was looking for the Tuan Empire. Just then someone outside suddenly said, "It's almost noon. I wonder what my esteemed guests would like to eat?" Please let me know so that I can prepare in advance. Is that boss saying? Yu Qianqiu took the cowhide scroll from the table and tossed it into his storage pouch. He walked over to open the door and saw Zhang Peng blocking the boss's way. Zhang Peng was a huge man to begin with. His block blocked the entire door. When he saw his master come out, he quickly moved to the side. Yu Qianqiu gently fanned himself. He looked at the amiable middle-aged man in front of him. No matter how he looked at him, he looked like a businessman. Who would have thought that he was a spy? Yu Qianqiu's smiling eyes revealed a sense of scrutiny. Occasionally he would reveal a sharp and threatening glint. The aura of a superior was faintly discernible. It was as if he viewed human lives as nothing more than grass. Mortals were indeed nothing in his eyes. Boss Sang felt a chill run down his spine under his gaze. He thought to himself, oh my. He didn't know who this person was. One look and he could tell that he was someone who had been through a lot of bloodshed. Moreover, he was the kind of person who wielded power. Boss Sang might be a small boss in the marketplace, but he was used to seeing all kinds of people in the marketplace. When it came to judging people, ordinary people couldn't compare to him. At the same time, he also knew that this person had an extraordinary background. Otherwise, he wouldn't have received a secret order so quickly. Moreover, the secret order was even stamped with the great general's personal seal. Sir. Boss Sang nodded and bowed with a smile. Then he quickly glanced at Zhang Peng. Judging from his strong physique, the calluses on his hands, and the look in his eyes, which were used to seeing life and death, this person was most likely from the military. As for the food, you can make it as you see fit. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and folded his fan. He pointed to the courtyard and said, just set it up here. I'll have a few drinks with Boss Sang and ask him some questions. I wouldn't dare. Sir, please ask away. Boss Sang smiled respectfully. Zhang Peng snorted coldly. Just do as Sir says. What's with all the nonsense? Zhang Peng, don't be rude. Yu Qianqiu reprimanded. Zhang Peng slightly folded his hands and said nothing, but his eyes were still fixed on Boss Sang. Boss Sang immediately nodded and said, very well. We'll do as Sir says. I'll go prepare now. With that, he turned around and quickly left. Yu Qianqiu watched him leave. Just as he was about to turn around and enter the house, he suddenly heard the sound of an argument coming from outside. Then he heard the sound of things being smashed and Boss Sang's kind words of advice. He couldn't help but frown. Zhang Ping bowed and said, Sir, I'll go take a look. Before they came, they had already discussed it. Master had changed the way he addressed Boss Sang to Sir. There was no need for him to look. A dozen or so valiant black-clothed servants had already barged into the courtyard through the curved door. A handsome young man in snow-white clothes slowly walked out from the crowd, waving a white folding fan in his hand. Yu Qianqiu exchanged a glance with him. Both of them were slightly stunned and subconsciously looked at the folding fan in their hands. Chapter 461. Swoosh. Yu Qianqiu opened the folding fan in his hand. My fan is bigger than yours and it's even golden in color. A faint sneer appeared on his face. The young man in white was taken aback, but he wasn't attracted by the fan. Instead, his gaze lingered on Yu Qianqiu's face for a moment. This was the first time he had seen such a handsome person. His gaze then fell on the fan in the young man's hand and he blurted out, vulgar. His voice was a little sweet. Although he was pretending to be a man, it couldn't conceal his femininity. Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng looked at each other. They weren't angered by his words. Instead, they began to scrutinize the young man. As they expected, the woman's features were very obvious. Her skin was fair and tender, her earlobes were pierced, and she didn't have an Adam's apple on her neck. As expected, she was a fake. Judging by her appearance, she was a rather good-looking fake. Yu Qianqiu noticed something even more interesting. When the fake was waving her fan, he noticed a thumb-sized lifelike dark green orchid embroidered on her sleeve. If he remembered correctly, the Jade archive he had read about Baiwan country showed that the symbol of Baiwan country's royalty was the exact same dark green orchid. Especially the fake's white fan. There was even a large Wen character written on it. Who was this girl in Baiwan country's royalty? Why would a member of Baiwan country's royalty come all the way here to stay in a small inn? Yu Qianqiu was deep in thought. At that moment, Boss Sang finally managed to squeeze his way into the courtyard. He first ran over to Yu Qianqiu and said respectfully, Sir, please forgive me for disturbing your rest. He then ran over to the young man and cupped his fists saying, Miss, this inn has been booked. Please take a few steps downstairs. There are several other inns. Were you calling a miss? The young man shouted in a masculine voice. She refused to admit it. Little did she know anyone could tell that she was a woman. Several guards dressed as servants came up to her. I was blind. Please forgive me, young master. Boss Sang apologized profusely. A middle-aged man next to the young master took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "Seeing that your shop is quiet and clean, my young master has given face to stay here. Don't be ungrateful. You have 15 minutes to clear out all the unrelated people. Otherwise you can close your shop." Zhang Peng was infuriated when he heard this. He was just about to take a step when Yu Qianqiu stopped him with his fan. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. It seemed that because of his arrival the inn was cleaned up from top to bottom, and it brought trouble to them instead. The middle-aged man who just spoke was actually an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. To be able to have a nascent soul cultivator as a guard, it seemed like this fake was undoubtedly a member of the royal family of Baiwan country. Boss Sang helplessly apologized, "Esteemed guests, please don't make things difficult for me. This shop is open for business and I've already accepted their money. How can I chase a guest out? There's no such thing." The middle-aged man raised his chin at Yu Qianqiu and said, "How much did they pay you?" "We'll double it." This. Boss Sang still wanted to explain, but someone behind him shouted, 10,000 taels of gold. "If you can take out 20,000 taels of gold, we'll move out immediately." Boss Sang turned around. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had spoken, he simply retreated to the side and stopped talking. The crowd's gazes all fell on Yu Qianqiu. The young man in white glared at him and shouted, "Do you think I'm ignorant? Renting this shop for a day costs 100 taels of silver. Who would spend 10,000 taels of gold?" "I said 10,000 taels of gold, so it's 10,000 taels of gold." Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "Didn't you say you'll pay double? Don't pretend to be rich if you don't have money. Get out of here and don't disturb my rest." "Are you purposely looking for trouble?" The middle-aged man's tone was indifferent as he slowly walked over. It seemed that he wanted to teach Yu Qianqiu a lesson. Zhang Peng clenched his fists. Zhang Peng clenched his fists. He had long wanted to teach these people a lesson. Yu Qianqiu gently folded his fan and said indifferently, "A mere early-stage nascent soul cultivator dares to behave atrociously in front of me? You're courting death." His words immediately caused the middle-aged man to stop in his tracks. His face was filled with shock as he asked, You're also a cultivator?" The fact that the other party could see through his cultivation meant that the other party's cultivation was above his. Then he looked at the towering man. The way he looked at him was extremely disdainful. It was obvious that the other party had seen through him as well. On the other hand, he couldn't even tell that these two were cultivators. It was obvious that their cultivation was much higher than his. "What? Do you have a problem with that?" Yu Qianqiu asked coldly. "Who are you? How dare you speak so arrogantly? Guards, open your mouth." The man in white robe angrily spoke in a bureaucratic tone. A few guards quickly rushed over. The middle-aged man spread his arms and shouted, "Stop! Back down." The guards were obviously extremely afraid of him. After being shouted at, they quickly stopped and bowed before retreating. The man in white robe was slightly stunned. He didn't understand why the man was suddenly afraid. This man was not a cultivator. How could he know what it meant to see through the other party's cultivation? The middle-aged man quickly apologized to Yu Qianqiu, "Mister, please forgive us. Our young master is ignorant and has disturbed you. We will leave now." "You want to leave just like that after bullying me?" Yu Qianqiu asked indifferently. The middle-aged man turned around. His face was slightly angry as he said in a deep voice, "I can see that Mister's cultivation is profound. I will respect Mister. If Mister is aggressive, I will not be afraid of trouble. Once we start fighting, the experts in Dayang City will come immediately. At that time, I don't know who will be embarrassed." He was right. With Wen Lanfeng's status as the second in the cultivation world, few people in the world would dare to not give them face except for Bai Changchun. But coincidentally, they met Bai Changchun's disciple. This was called, enemies would not meet unless they were enemies. Interesting. Wen Lanfeng's disciples and grand disciples actually dare to threaten me. Yu Qianqiu sneered. His words left everyone at a loss, including the white-clothed young master. She obviously didn't know who the Wen Lanfeng that Yu Qianqiu spoke of was. Yu Qianqiu was secretly depressed. He thought, did I misjudge? The middle-aged man was stunned for a long time. He asked in a surprised voice, Mister, do you know our ancestor?" "Fortunately. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. Causing trouble here was indeed not a good idea. Although he wasn't afraid of anything, Shi Wenguang must have had a hard time setting up an ambush in an enemy nation. If he messed it up, then he would be letting Shi Wenguang down. He waved his fan disapprovingly and said, "We haven't seen each other for many years, but we still have some friendship. I wonder if you can tell me your name so that I know which senior showed mercy to me. I can report this to my superiors when I return," the middle-aged man said respectfully with a shocked expression. He had already bowed so deeply that he was almost touching the ground. Although the person in front of him looked young, how could the cultivation world judge one's age by appearance? It wouldn't be too much of a problem if the other party was acquainted with the old ancestor, but the other party was actually saying that he was acquainted with the old ancestor. The old ancestor was already a deity transformation final stage cultivator, so those who were acquainted with him were most likely deity transformation final stage cultivators. When he thought that he might have offended a master in the soul formation stage, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He had indeed been a little careless with his words. If the other party wanted to kill them, they wouldn't even know how they died, let alone wait for help. Yu Qianqiu folded the fan in his hand and said sternly, "If it weren't for the fact that you're from the Wanbi Nation's Wen clan, none of you would be able to leave here today." Boss Sang narrowed his eyes and quickly swept his gaze over these people. So these people were from the royal family of Baiwan Nation. No wonder they were so arrogant. The white-robed man and his guards looked at each other. It turned out that the other party had already seen through their identities. The middle-aged man bowed again and said, "Thank you for showing mercy, senior. Thank you for showing mercy. Go back and tell that old man Wen Lanfeng that he has taught a bunch of good disciples to bully an old friend of mine from the South Sea. I'd like to see if he can still hide in Baiwan Nation. Tell old man Wen Lanfeng to personally come to the South Sea to apologize to me. Otherwise, don't blame me for tearing down Baiwan Nation's palace." Yu Qianqiu boasted shamelessly. These words were earth-shattering to the ears of everyone present. Although the white-robed man and his guards didn't know who this so-called Wen Lanfeng was, they knew they had offended someone they couldn't afford to offend. Otherwise, who would dare say something like tearing down Baiwan Nation's palace? They were all dumbfounded. Zhang Peng had always been a calm person, but when he heard these words he was completely confused. Could it be that Master had territory in the South Sea? Boss Sang was even more speechless. Wow! Just who were these honored guests of the general? They wanted to tear down Baiwan Nation's palace just because they were unhappy. This was incredible. No wonder the general personally stamped a secret order and urgently sent it over. The middle-aged man opened his mouth and asked with a trembling voice, "Sir, are you from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest? How dare you? Don't say what you shouldn't say. Tell old man Wen Lanfeng he will naturally know who I am." Yu Qianqiu reprimanded. "Yes, yes, yes." The middle-aged man answered repeatedly, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. As Wen Lanfeng's disciples and grand disciples, how many of them didn't know who Wen Lanfeng's old friend from the South Sea was? The famous Mr. Nongzhu from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest was Wen Lanfeng's savior. If it weren't for Mr. Nongzhu, Wen Lanfeng would have died in the hands of the world's #1 expert, Bai Changchun. If it weren't for Mr. Nongzhu, Baiwan Nation would have been annexed by the surrounding countries after Wen Lanfeng's death. Most importantly, it was said that Mr. Nongzhu's cultivation had reached the middle stage of soul formation. An ordinary cultivator couldn't afford to offend him. So, damn it, Mr. Nongzhu was a famous handsome man in the cultivation world. The man in front of him was unusually handsome and looked similar to the rumors. If he had thought of this earlier, he wouldn't have caused such a ruckus. The middle-aged man's intestines turned green with regret. If he really brought Mr. Nongzhu's words back, he would probably die. Chapter 462. What did Wen Lanfeng mean to Baiwan country? He was a national artifact, the treasure of the country. Although Wen Lanfeng had stopped meddling in secular affairs for a long time, as long as Wen Lanfeng was alive, Baiwan country would not decline. This was an undeniable fact. He had humiliated the savior of the country's great ancestor. Moreover, he was a middle-stage divine transformation expert. If he brought this back, he would be killed. Even His Majesty, the current emperor, would not be able to keep the little princess safe. The middle-aged man looked back at the white-robed man sadly. The most terrifying thing was that Mr. Nongzhu wanted the great ancestor to go to the South Sea to apologize. Who in the entire royal family would dare to disturb the great ancestor's meditation, let alone the fact that he could not see the great ancestor? To say the least, even if someone could see the great ancestor, who would dare to ask the great ancestor to go to the South Sea to apologize? There was no one in the entire Baiwan country who would dare to do so. But if they did not do so, Mr. Nongzhu would tear down the palace of Baiwan country. Apart from the great ancestor, who in Baiwan country could stop Mr. Nongzhu, who was famous in the cultivation world? Once the great ancestor was alarmed, the consequences would be unimaginable. No matter how he thought about it, it was a dead end. The middle-aged man's face was ashen. He was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He stood still like a wooden chicken. "Uncle Bai, who is he?" The white-robed man walked over, trembling with fear. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and asked cautiously, "How dare you say I'm vulgar?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and waved the big fan in his hand. He had the demeanor of an expert. "Shut up. Kneel." The middle-aged man shouted at the white-robed man. Then he knelt down in front of Yu Qianqiu and pleaded, "Please spare our lives for the sake of our great ancestor. I will be very grateful." The white-robed man looked incredulous when he saw the middle-aged man kneeling down. He was stunned for a moment and then knelt down obediently. When these two people knelt down, the dozen or so guards behind them didn't dare to continue standing. With a hua sound, they all knelt down. Boss Sang was even more shocked now. He could tell that this group of people was undoubtedly the royal family of Baiwan Nation. This lady dressed as a man might even be a princess of Baiwan Nation. Now, just because of a few words from this gentleman, all of them actually knelt down and asked for forgiveness? Southern Sea Purple Bamboo Forest? What kind of place is this? Boss Sang thought to himself. He had never heard of such a place before. On the other hand, Zhang Peng admired his master more and more. His master was indeed an unfathomable person. His heart was filled with worship. Furong, who had been standing nervously behind the door, thinking that something was going to happen, was astonished when she saw this scene. She didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so capable after leaving Fuxian Island. He could make a bunch of people kneel down with just a few words. At the same time she felt more at ease, so she bit her lips and stood behind Yu Qianqiu. "What's the meaning of this?" Yu Qianqiu waved his fan and said indifferently, "I didn't say I want your lives. Get up quickly lest someone sees you and accuses me of bullying the weak." In his heart he muttered, "I didn't expect the handsome Nongzhu to be so popular outside. It seems I can make good use of him. Who told you to always bully me? I'm Wen Bai. I've long heard that Mr. likes to play games in the mortal world. I didn't expect to offend you today." The middle-aged man said while kowtowing repeatedly, "I should go back to receive my punishment, but I didn't dare to disturb the old ancestors' cultivation. I hope that Senior will let this matter go since we don't know anything." He gritted his teeth and threw caution to the wind. Instead of going back to receive his death, he might as well pluck up his courage and try. Perhaps there would be a chance. That's exactly what I wanted. If that Wen Lanfeng really comes out, I'm afraid it'll be hard to clean up. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and turned to look at Furong. He asked softly, "Did I scare you? What do you think we should do?" Everyone's eyes immediately focused on the sickly Furong. They didn't expect the final decision to be made by this inconspicuous woman. Wen Bai looked at her with a pleading expression. As Yu Qianqiu expected, Furong was soft-hearted and couldn't do anything evil. She gently pulled his sleeve and said, "Forget it." The group of people immediately heaved a sigh of relief. However, they only saw Yu Qianqiu closing his fan as he solemnly said, "I can overlook this matter and treat it as if nothing had happened. However, you all used your strength to bully others and destroyed the inn's items. Because of me, the inn suffered losses for nothing. I will punish you all to compensate heavily. Do you all accept this?" "Yes, yes, yes." Wen Bai quickly got up and went to Boss Sang. He cupped his hands and apologized, "I'm really sorry. May I know how much the broken things will be worth? I'm willing to pay double the amount as compensation." Boss Sang was speechless. However, the broken bowls and plates really weren't worth much. He couldn't help but glance at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately said without any trace of politeness, "Since I've spoken up to seek justice for them, 1,000 taels of gold is worth it." Wen Bai was stunned. He quickly nodded and said, "It's worth it. Mister's words are priceless. Even 10,000 taels of gold is worth it." He quickly took out the storage pouch from his robes and used his divine sense to check, but found that it wasn't enough. He called for the guards to gather the money, but found that it was still not enough. He had no choice but to ask the young master to hand over the pouch as well. After gathering everything, Wen Bai finally returned with a bitter expression. Mister, please wait a moment. There's only about 800 taels of gold here. I'll go to the embassy to get it. Forget it. If I continue to be long-winded with you all, it'll seem like I'm calculative. Yu Qianshou interrupted with a wave of his fan. He then pointed at the storage pouch in Wenbai's hand to Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng walked over and grabbed the pouch. Thank you, mister. Wenbai bowed and said. This matter had come to an end. His worried heart could finally be at ease. It could be considered a blessing and a misfortune. Don't kneel. Let's go. Do you want me to treat you all to a meal? Yu Qianshou said with an expressionless face. The group of people quickly stood up. The young master in white pouted and silently bowed with a wronged expression. Wenbai was about to leave when he saw Yu Qianshou point the fan in his hand at the young master in white. He said, What's the name of this cross-dressing girl? Wenqing. The young master in white pouted and replied unwillingly. Wenbai saw this and thought to himself, Oh no. Look at the situation now and you're still acting like a princess. Why don't you look at who you're facing? Even your father can't afford to offend you. Sure enough, Yu Qianshou tapped the fan in his other hand lightly. He said in a neutral tone, Looking at you, you seem to have a lot of opinions about my decision. If you're not convinced, why don't you say it now? I hate it when people curse me behind my back. Wenqing wouldn't dare. The young master in white had now completely reverted to her female voice. Although she said she wouldn't dare, everyone could hear the grievance in her voice. Yu Qianshou tapped the fan lightly. His gaze fell on the golden headband in her hair and he slowly walked over. Wenbai was startled. He cupped his fists and said, Sir? As soon as the words left his mouth, Yu Qianshou glared at him and swallowed them. Yu Qianshou walked up to the silent Wenqing. He extended his fan and gently lifted her chin. He looked at the beautiful face that dared to be angry but did not dare to speak. He said, You can be considered a beauty. Why do you like to cross-dress? Take off the headband and let me see. Zhang Peng was stunned. Boss Sang was stunned. Wenbai was stunned. The guards looked at each other. Could it be that he had taken a fancy to Wenqing? Farong blinked. She did not know what he was trying to do. The Wenqing's pretty face turned red. She bit her lips so hard that it almost bled. She did not say anything, nor did she move. She was a dignified princess of a country. When had she ever been humiliated like this? And in front of so many people? Little did she know that Yu Qianshou wanted to take her pride down a notch. The fan lifted her chin again. Yu Qianshou said indifferently, Do you want me to do it myself? If you don't take it off, I'll have him do it. Once he takes it off for you, I'll give you to him to warm his bed. The fan let go of her chin and pointed at Zhang Peng. Thank you, sir. Zhang Peng cupped his fists and bowed. He strode over. Who would have thought that this guy liked to play dry humor? The Wenqing immediately shouted in horror, I'll take it off. She quickly took off the golden headband and angrily threw it on the ground. However, as soon as she threw it, Yu Qianshou seemed to have guessed what she was going to do. He stretched out the fan in his hand and flicked it. The golden headband flipped towards Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng casually caught it. As the saying goes, the layman enjoys the show, while the connoisseur recognizes the artistry. Yu Qianshou's casual flick of the fan seemed to be something that anyone could do. However, what was rare was that it seemed natural. It was as if the Wenqing had cooperated with him and purposely threw the golden headband towards his fan. The group of guards' pupils shrank. They all praised in their hearts. What amazing skills. Wenbai was secretly shocked. As expected of a soul formation expert. Just a casual move was enough to predict the enemy's movements. Zhang Peng, however, did not think much of it. Master's skills were amazing. In fact, Yu Qianshou himself was stunned. Just now he had subconsciously done it. He didn't even move his body. He had just casually moved his arm and fan. He hadn't expected that the size of the fan would be so perfect. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was exquisite. He did not even know how he did it. In a flash, he remembered what Bai Changchun said when he taught him the animal play. He was overjoyed. Old man Bai did not lie to him. The Wenqing stood there with her hair disheveled. In the blink of an eye, the handsome young master had changed. Especially her eyes, which were already welling with tears. She was trying hard not to cry. Yu Qianshou raised the fan in his hand and parted the messy hair on her forehead. Her beautiful face, rosy cheeks and tearful cheeks were really pitiful. She was indeed a great beauty. All right, you can go. Yu Qianshou expressionlessly said as he held the fan and knocked on the Wenqing's forehead. Thank you, sir. Wenbai bowed awkwardly. He then scolded the Wenqing, hurry up and thank sir. He was really afraid of causing trouble again. Thank you, sir. The wenching was full of grievances. As soon as she finished speaking, she immediately burst into tears and ran away. The group of guards quickly bowed and left to chase after her. Chapter 463. Without the group of people, the courtyard became much quieter. There were only a few sparrows chirping on an old tree in the corner. Yuqianqiu opened his folding fan and waved it gently. He stared expressionlessly at the sparrows hopping about on the tree branch. He truly had the demeanor of an expert. Boss Sang walked over and said respectfully, "Please wait a moment, sir. The food and wine will be ready soon." Yuqianqiu grunted softly and didn't mention the gold again. After he walked out of the courtyard, Zhang Peng took the initiative to hand over the storage bag. Yuqianqiu put it away and pretended that nothing had happened. He had a lot of spirit stones on him and didn't have much gold or silver in the secular world. Since someone had taken the initiative to give him money, he could use it to accompany Hibiscus. Not long after, a waiter brought over a square table and placed it in the center of the courtyard along with a chair. Piping hot food and wine were served one after another. It was an exceptionally sumptuous meal. Boss Sang told the waiter not to disturb them and invited the three to take a seat. He wanted to stand to the side and keep them company, but Yuqianqiu told him not to be overly courteous. Boss Sang sat down with some trepidation, and the four of them sat around the table. After tasting a few cups of wine, Yuqianqiu said, "Boss Sang, there's no need to stand. Relax and sit. Let me ask you, did something happen in Dayang City?" Boss Sang thought for a moment and said, "Nothing happened? Ever since Dayang and Huaxia stopped fighting, Dayang City has been unprecedentedly stable. No more able-bodied men are needed. After the war, the people are living and working in peace. Nothing major has happened." Once he said this, he was no longer as nervous. Hibiscus quietly ate by herself, occasionally glancing at Yuqianqiu with satisfaction. Zhang Ping wasn't so pretentious. He listened as he ate and didn't hesitate to grab food with his hands. He really didn't treat himself as an outsider. Boss Sang didn't dare to be too presumptuous. If the gentleman opposite him didn't move his chopsticks, he definitely wouldn't. Yuqianqiu picked up some food for Furong with his chopsticks and said doubtfully, "That's strange. The distance between Baiwan Nation and Dayan Nation isn't short. The princess of Baiwan Nation disguised herself as a man and came all the way here with her guards. Did she come here just to have fun?" "Sir, now that you mention it, I do recall something. I wonder if it has anything to do with this." Boss Sang nodded slightly. "Feel free to speak your mind." Yuqianqiu smiled. 3 days later, the beloved daughter of His Majesty the Emperor of the Dayang Kingdom, 3rd Princess Zhao Qinxiang, will compete in martial arts to find a husband. During this period of time, many nobles from various countries have arrived. "I wonder if the arrival of Baiwan Nation's princess has anything to do with this matter?" Boss Sang said. "Could it be that this girl wants to disguise herself as a man and become the prince consort?" Yuqianqiu was stunned. He didn't think that it was possible. After all, this wasn't a movie. He asked again, "Why is the dignified princess of Dayan Kingdom looking for a husband? Could it be that the emperor of Dayan Kingdom can't find a good husband for her?" "This Princess Zhao Qinxiang is a widow who has yet to marry." At this point, Boss Sang said with some pride, "Her husband was originally a general. Unfortunately, he was unlucky. Just a few days before the wedding, he was killed by a valiant general from Huaxia during the last battle." Zhang Ping, who was chewing on a lamb leg, was slightly stunned. He interrupted, "Then the 3rd princess's husband is called Chu Xiong?" "Yes." Boss Sang slapped the table with some excitement and said, "He is indeed called Chu Xiong. That fellow is considered a valiant general in the Dayang Kingdom. Unfortunately, he ran into our great general's #1 valiant general." The last sentence was said in a very low tone, clearly afraid that outsiders would hear. Yuqianqiu looked at Zhang Peng and asked suspiciously, "What? You know Chu Xiong?" Zhang Peng put down the lamb leg in his hand and said with a mischievous smile, "Sir, you may not know this, but when we fought against the Dayang Kingdom, I was the vanguard. The last battle was also fought by me. Chu Xiong was also killed by me when I fought him." "Then you have to take responsibility for the widow." Yuqianqiu raised his wine cup and teased. Zhang Peng laughed mischievously, "I haven't married her yet. As long as she is willing, I will accompany her at any time. I am not even afraid of her man, so why would I be afraid of her?" The two of them were having some fun and joking. Boss Sang's face was full of shock as he said, Zhang Peng? Zhang Peng? I should have guessed long ago. You are the #1 general under the great general, General Zhang Peng. But, didn't you violate military discipline and be beheaded by the great general? Zhang Peng looked at Yu Qianqiu and nodded with a smile. I was supposed to be beheaded to uphold military discipline, but I just so happened to run into Sir. Sir, you saved me from my blade. Boss sang it is enough for you to know this. Don't tell anyone else. I wouldn't dare. When I heard the news of the general's beheading, I didn't know how long I had been heartbroken. Now that I know that the general is still alive, I won't tell anyone. Boss Sang was pleasantly surprised. It was obvious that these spies placed in enemy countries by the army were very respectful towards their homeland and the brave generals in the army. Zhang Peng waved his hand and said, "Don't call me general. I have followed Sir for many years and have long since stopped calling me that." Boss Sang repeatedly agreed. "Zhang Peng, do you want to meet the widow princess?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked with a smile. Although Hibiscus had little contact with the outside world, she could still understand what they were saying. At this moment she was chewing on some vegetables and staring unblinkingly at Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng's mind was a little muddled. He was stunned for a long time and hesitantly said, "Sir, do you want me to have a martial arts competition to select the emperor's son-in-law?" Boss Sang's mouth went round in a circle. When two countries faced off against each other, he killed the fiancée of someone else and then broke into the enemy country to marry his fiancée. When he came back to his senses he tried to dissuade him. "Sir, I'm afraid that won't do. After all, the princess of Daong is a princess. This martial arts competition to select the emperor's son-in-law must be someone of status. I'm afraid ordinary people don't have the qualifications to sign up." "That's simple. I'll go find those people from Baiwan country and ask for a high-ranking Baiwan country status. It's just a registration. I don't think it'll be a difficult matter." Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. Zhang Peng asked in a daze, "Sir, do you really want me to go?" He was a little confused. Why did they want to meddle in worldly affairs? "What? Are you afraid?" Yu Qianqiu smiled. With Sir here, what's there to be afraid of?" Zhang Peng wiped his oily mouth and grinned. "I just think it's a little too exciting." "Ah. All right, then it's settled. After we finish eating, I'll go find the people from Baiwan country." Yu Qianqiu smiled as he poured the wine in his cup into his mouth. "Sir, that," Zhang Peng said shyly, "what if I'm really selected as the emperor's son-in-law? Do I really have to become the emperor's son-in-law?" "Are you stupid? We're just going to join in the fun. If you don't like the princess, you can find an opportunity to be defeated by your opponent. Isn't this a martial arts competition for a spouse?" Yu Qianqiu paused. "Of course, if you like the princess and want to have a taste of her bed, I won't object." Hearing this, Zhang Peng and Boss Sang looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Hibiscus, who had food in her mouth, struggled to swallow it. She stared at them and asked curiously, "Is the princess's bed very comfortable?" The three men, who had just raised their cups to each other and had wine in their mouths, all spat it out when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and said awkwardly, "I don't know either. If you want to try, I'll find an opportunity to take you there." Hibiscus smiled with an eager expression. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly picked food for her and stuffed her mouth so that she wouldn't say anything scary. He had a reason for asking Zhang Peng to compete for the emperor's son-in-law. For a long time, the Wuxia cultivation world had a sense of seclusion. Basically, they didn't have any contact with the foreign cultivation world. They knew very little about the foreign cultivation world, almost nothing at all. Right now, he urgently needed to find an entry point to the cultivation world so that he could gather some information. It would be best if he could open up a path. It seemed that the cultivation world of the various countries here had a close relationship with the royal family. Letting Zhang Peng participate in the martial arts competition to select the emperor's son-in-law was a good opportunity to make contact with the cultivation world of the various countries. The western suburbs of Daong City were where the embassies of the various countries that had diplomatic relations with Daong Nation were located. Baiwan Nation's embassy was naturally located here as well. It wasn't small, and it was a very grand and imposing mansion. In fact, the embassies of the various countries were built in an imposing manner. The purpose was none other than to show their country's powerful image. The dozen or so guards standing guard in front of Baiwan Nation's embassy suddenly saw a man with disheveled hair rushing over. They were about to shout at him to retreat with their weapons. However, when they saw the group of people behind the man, they immediately moved aside, allowing the man with disheveled hair to run in while wailing loudly. Soon after, the group of people followed him in. The man who was wailing loudly was naturally the hipster who had been greatly humiliated. After he ran in, the servants and the envoys who came and went were at a loss of what to do. The hipster directly rushed into the main hall, whose doors were wide open. When he saw a middle-aged man with a dignified aura sitting upright and talking to someone beside him, he immediately burst into tears. Uncle Wang, I've been bullied. You have to help me. Wah. He was crying his heart out. The group of people in the hall were startled by the man with disheveled hair. When they heard who it was, they were all stunned. The dignified middle-aged man jumped to his feet. When he saw the hipster's disheveled appearance, his expression darkened. What on earth is going on? The group of people also stood up with sullen expressions. How could the dignified princess of Baiwan nation be bullied? Especially in a foreign country, this was simply an insult to the country's image. The hipster with disheveled hair wiped away his tears. He turned around and pointed at Wenbai who was outside and cried, "Ask him." Once the dozen or so guards arrived at the entrance of the main hall, they immediately scattered to the sides. This was not a place they could enter casually. Wenbai walked in and cupped his hands at the man above him. The man also cupped his hands in return. "Brother Wenbai, what on earth is going on? With you by her side, how could Qing be bullied? How do you want me to explain this to my brother when I return?" "Your Highness, don't mention this again." Wenbai walked up to him and whispered in his ear, "Just now, the princess offended someone we can't afford to offend." What a joke. The prince slammed the table beside him and sneered. "Not many people in the world dare to bully the royal family of Baiwan nation. Please calm down, Your Highness." Wenbai shook his head and smiled bitterly. He whispered again. This time, the person the princess offended was Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. It's already good enough that we can come back alive. What? It's him? The prince was immediately dumbfounded. He looked at the crying hipster with an indescribable expression. Chapter 464. The prince's name was Wen Yuan, and he was the younger brother of the current emperor of Baiwan Kingdom. Ordinary members of the royal family might not know the secrets of the royal family, but how could he, one of the top figures of the royal family, not know the history of the Wen family? It was precisely because of this that he was shocked. The hidden old ancestor was a peerless expert with mysterious means. It was because of his fame that the Wen family had established its current status in Baiwan Kingdom. Who was Mr. Nongzhu? He was one of the few friends of the old ancestor. It was said that he was also a peerless expert with mysterious means. There was also a legend that Mr. Nongzhu was the old ancestor's benefactor. This matter involved the old ancestor's romantic past, and it was strictly forbidden to spread within the royal family. When Yu Yuan glanced at the still crying scholar and swept his eyes over the people on the left and right sides of the hall. These people were the relatives of the royal family and some meritorious officials who came with the team. He waved his hand at them and said, "You can leave for now." The group of people saluted and left the hall. However, there was a young man who looked similar to the prince who did not leave. He was hesitant and seemed to have something to say. This person was the prince's second son, Wen Chongzheng. Wen Yuan frowned slightly and said, "Chongzheng, do you have something else?" Wen Chongzheng said respectfully, "Father, I want to stay and listen to what is going on. I want to see if I can help you." How dare he disobey his father's order? Wen Yuan raised his eyebrows and swallowed the reprimand that was at the tip of his tongue. This youngest son was born of a concubine. Because he was born of a concubine, it was not his turn to inherit the throne. That was why there was this trip to Dian Kingdom. Baiwan Kingdom had a cruel rule for the royal family. Because Baiwan Kingdom's territory was not very large, in order to suppress the spread of royal family members, each royal family could only have one descendant to inherit the title. Once the others were married, they would be demoted to commoners. Normally, even if these people were demoted to commoners, they would still have a background. But unfortunately, because of that cruel rule, no one wanted to give up on the inheritance of the title, and the internal strife between the brothers continued unabated. Imagine, after someone inherited the title and gained power, how could he let go of his former enemies? Therefore, many people who lost the right to inherit had a very bleak ending. No one dared to change the iron law set by the ancestors. It was precisely because Wen Yuan did not want to see the situation of his two sons killing each other that he had allowed the dignified prince to run for the emperor's son-in-law. He hoped that he would be able to protect both his wealth and his life. This was also a last resort. Most of the people in the hall had come for this reason. When Yu Yuan wanted to reject his son's request, but he couldn't bear to say it out loud, Wen Bai, who was at the side, knew that it was hard for him to say. He glanced at Wen Chongjing and said with a faint smile, "Your Highness, after all, the literati already know about it. It's fine even if Chongjing knows about it. I believe that Chongjing will not spread it." Although his surname was Wen, he had been adopted by the Wen family since he was young because of his talent for cultivation. He was not a true blood relative of the Wen family, but he was one of the protectors of the Wen family. When Chongjing, who had his head slightly lowered, had a calm expression on his face. His fists, which were hidden in his sleeves, were tightly clenched. His nails had already sunk deep into his flesh. Just because he was born of a concubine and not a legitimate son, he wasn't even given a chance to be filial? "Father, aren't you a little too ruthless?" Wen Yuan's gaze swept past his son, and he did not look at him directly. He asked Wen Bai, "What is going on? Mr. Nongzhu is a mysterious person. How did you offend him? Brother Wen Bai, can you really confirm that he is Mr. Nongzhu?" When the words Mr. Nongzhu came out, Wen Chongjing's eyebrows twitched involuntarily. Others might think that he did not know who Mr. Nongzhu was, but he had unintentionally heard of this person. He was a person with great magical power. No wonder even the princess had to suffer. The princess insisted on going out to experience the customs of the Daong kingdom, so she picked a relatively clean inn and prepared to stay. Who knew that the inn had already been booked by Mr. Nongzhu? Wen Bai immediately roughly explained what had happened. Because when Chongjing was present, he decided to leave the details to the prince alone. Unexpectedly, the tearful literati wiped his tears and said, "Uncle, who is that person? He could tell that we are the royal family of the Baiwan kingdom, but he actually dared to force Qing to kneel and admit her mistake. Also, who in the royal family is Wen Lanfeng? Why have I never heard of him?" That person kept saying that he wanted Wen Lanfeng to personally go to the South Sea to apologize to him, or he would tear down the palace of the Baiwan kingdom. He was so arrogant, but Uncle Bai still sided with him and bullied Qing together. "Boo!" She cried again. Her tone seemed to be complaining, but the listener was listening attentively. Wen Bai smiled bitterly. He originally wanted to leave these words to Wen Yuan, but who knew that she would spill it all out? Wen Yuan's scalp tingled. He naturally knew that the elder ancestor was Wen Lanfeng. In this world, who else could ask Wen Lanfeng to go to the South Sea to apologize but that person in the South Sea? Oh my God. This girl was easy to provoke, but why did she provoke him? The elder ancestor could not give face to anyone, but he had to give face to that person. He had saved his life. When Chongjing looked calm, but his heart was in turmoil. That Mr. Nongzhu was actually a person who could influence the legendary elder ancestor of the Wen family? Oh my God. His heart was beating wildly, and he seemed to have found a way to the other side of the sea of bitterness. He had long had this intention, so he more or less knew some hidden things, so he knew who Wen Lanfeng was, unlike Princess Wenqing who was ignorant. 800 taels of gold will be fine? Wen Yuan murmured. When he heard Wenqing sobbing without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth, he immediately pointed his finger and shouted angrily, "Still crying? Do you know that you almost caused a terrible disaster? If something happens, even your father will be implicated and no one can save you." The sobbing stopped and Wenqing's mouth opened. Her hair was disheveled and she stood there pitifully, not daring to cry anymore. It was the first time she had seen Uncle Wang so angry at her. When she heard that even her father might be implicated, she finally believed that she had really provoked someone she could not afford to offend. With tears in her eyes, she tried to guess who the vulgar guy with the big fan was. Outside the hall, a servant lightly walked in and respectfully said, "Your Highness, lunch is ready. Please enjoy your meal." "Get lost." Wen Yuan roared wildly. Immediately, the servant was so scared that he scrambled out, not knowing how he had offended the prince. "Come." Wen Yuan shouted again. Two guards with sabers on their waists quickly ran in to greet him. Wen Yuan waved at Wenqing and said in a deep voice, "Order all the guards in the embassy to keep an eye on the princess. Without my order, no one is allowed to let the princess go out. If you let her step out, I'll take both of your heads." "Yes." The two guards stood up, but they were shocked. Although the prince was noble, it was a bit too much to put the princess under house arrest. But they were the guards of the prince's mansion, so they stood behind the princess without saying a word, obeying the prince's order. "Uncle Wang." Qing knows she was wrong. Wenqing said with infinite grievance. But it was useless to act spoiled today. When Yuan said sternly, "Shut up, I will ask your father to punish you when we go back." Wenqing was dumbfounded. Wenbai shook his head and sighed. When Chongjing, on the other hand, realized how powerful Mr. Nongzhu was. After Wen Yuan calmed down a little, he turned and said, "Brother Wenbai, I will go change first. I will trouble you to bring me to see Mr. later. I want to apologize in person. Since Mr. has promised not to pursue the matter, I believe he will not go back on his words. If we go, I am afraid we will make Mr. unhappy." Wenbai was stunned. When Yu Yuan said with a bitter smile, "I will not be at ease without seeing him. I hope Brother Wenbai can understand." Although he said that, he more or less wanted to get to know the senior expert. He had never seen the ancestor in his life, so it was enough to be able to see Mr. Nongzhu. "All right then," Wenbai said with a helpless smile. Following which, the two of them walked out together, leaving only the four of them in the hall. The two guards stayed close to the princess, while Wenqing stared at Wen Chongjing with endless resentment and said, "Brother Wang, you have to stay behind and accompany me." Cough cough. Wen Chongjing coughed twice and said, "Father also told me to do something. I do not have time to accompany you for now. Take care, sister. The two of you must not neglect the princess." The last sentence was said to the two guards, clearly telling them to keep a close watch. After saying that, he hurriedly ran away. "Brother Wang, stop right there." Wenqing's tiger-like roar came from behind him and he ran even faster. At Guangying Tavern, after Yu Qianqiu and the others had eaten and drunk their fill, Boss Sang called for someone to clean up the leftovers. He personally went to the street outside and bought 3 money pouches. These things were what Yu Qianqiu wanted. He was naturally prepared to spend money to accompany Furong shopping, but hanging a storage pouch outside was too conspicuous, so he still needed the money pouches. Boss Sang had just returned to the entrance of Guangying Tavern with the 3 money pouches when he came face to face with 4 people. One of them was the person who had previously compensated Mr. Nongzhu. Although he did not understand why they had come again, he still nodded and smiled in greeting. Wenbai glanced at the 3 money pouches in Boss Sang's hands and immediately understood. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Boss, we meet again. Is that Mr. still in the tavern?" Boss Sang quickly looked them up and down, then returned the greeting and asked, "What business do you have with Mr. Nongzhu?" When Yu Yuan, who was standing to the side, cupped his hands and said with a smile, "This humble one has come to apologize to Mr. Nongzhu because of my niece's recklessness. I'll have to trouble Boss Sang to inform him." As he spoke, he slightly waved his hand behind him. A guard took out a shining white ingot of silver and stuffed it into Boss Sang's hands. Boss Sang put on a happy expression and said, "Please wait a moment. I will go inform him immediately." He then hurriedly ran inside. When he reached the back courtyard, he saw that the innocent woman was playing with the 3 piles of gold and silver on the table. She was having a great time. Mr. Nongzhu was standing to the side, waving his fan and watching with a smile. General Zhang Ping suddenly turned around. When he saw that it was Mr. Nongzhu, his vigilant gaze relaxed. "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."